Hi guys. Tonight we step into a world so distant and quiet that it almost feels like a dream you were never meant to remember. You find yourself standing on open land, the air cool and still, carrying only the faint scent of earth and distant water. There are no cities, no roads, no lights stretching across the horizon, just space. Endless, patient space. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. There's something quietly comforting about knowing that across the world others are drifting into this same gentle journey. Now dim the lights and let yourself step fully into this forgotten moment in time. You stand still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The land around you feels both familiar and unfamiliar at once. Low grasses stretch in uneven patches broken by scattered trees that lean slightly, as if shaped by years of steady wind. The sky is wide, pale and open, with the soft, early light of dawn spreading slowly across it. This is not the world you know, not quite. A mainstream understanding among scientists tells us that around 80,000 years ago, early humans known as Homo sapiens were already walking the earth, physically almost identical to you. The same structure of hands, the same capacity for thought, the same quiet awareness you feel now as you breathe in the morning air. And yet something about this time remains strangely hidden. You begin to walk. The ground beneath your feet is firm but uneven, textured with small stones and patches of dry soil. Each step makes a faint sound soft enough that it blends into the natural silence. There is no constant hum of distant machines, no background noise pressing in on your thoughts. Just the quiet rhythm of your movement. Somewhere ahead you notice shapes. At first they are only shadows against the rising light, but as you move closer they begin to take form. A small group of people gathered loosely, moving in slow, deliberate ways. Their motions are calm, unhurried, as if time itself flows differently here. You approach carefully, though there is no real sense of danger. They notice you, but only briefly. A glance, a pause. Then they return to what they were doing, as if your presence fits naturally into the world around them. There is no sudden alarm, no confusion, just quiet acceptance. You might find that a little surprising. In modern life, a stranger appearing out of nowhere would likely cause quite a stir. But here reactions are simpler, more grounded in the moment. Perhaps it is because life itself demands constant attention. There is little room for extended curiosity. You watch as one person kneels near the ground, carefully examining something among the grass. Their hands move slowly, gently parting the blades. Another stands nearby, scanning the distance, not with tension but with a steady awareness. A quirky detail that researchers often point out is that early humans likely spent much of their time in this kind of quiet observation. Not rushing, not multitasking, but focusing deeply on small details. A shift in the wind, a change in animal tracks, the colour of plants. It is a different kind of attention than what most of us are used to today. You take a slow breath and notice the air again. It feels clean, almost sharp in your lungs. There is a faint trace of smoke somewhere carried lightly by the breeze. Not strong, not overwhelming, just enough to hint at something nearby. Fire! You follow the scent without thinking too much about it. Your body seems to understand before your mind does. The group begins to move as well, naturally drifting in the same direction. As you walk, you begin to notice small details that were easy to miss at first. The way the ground dips slightly, guiding your path. The subtle patterns in the vegetation showing where water might collect after rain. The faint impressions left by animals that passed through earlier. This landscape is not empty at all. It's full of quiet forms. Scholars remain divided on exactly how advanced human cognition was during this period. Some researchers suggest that people living 80,000 years ago were already capable of complex thought planning and even early symbolic behavior. Others believe that while the physical brain was similar to ours, the way it was used may have been simpler, more immediate. As you continue walking, you begin to sense that both ideas might hold some truth. There is intelligence here, but it is not loud or showy. It does not announce itself. It lives in small actions. in the way someone adjusts their step to avoid loose stones, in the way another pauses listening before moving forward. Eventually the group slows. You see it now, a small fire low to the ground, its glow faint in the growing daylight. Thin strands of smoke rise upward, dissolving into the air. Around it, a few simple objects are scattered. Stones arranged with purpose, pieces of wood placed carefully nearby. You step closer, feeling the warmth just barely reach you. Fire at this point in human history is not a new discovery, but it is still something remarkable. A mainstream historical view tells us that controlled use of fire had already become a central part of human life long before this era. It provided warmth, protection, and a way to prepare food. But sitting here, you realize it is more than that. It is a center point. The people gather around it not out of habit, but because it draws them in. It creates a shared space, a place where movement slows, where attention settles. You lower yourself to the ground, feeling the texture beneath your hands. Dry grass, cool soil. Oh. The warmth of the fire contrasts gently with the cool air, creating a small pocket of comfort in an otherwise open world. No one speaks, at least not in a way you would recognize. There are sounds, of course. Soft vocal tones, small gestures, subtle shifts in expression. Communication happens, but it flows differently. It does not rely on long strings of words. It exists in the space between actions. You might find yourself wondering how much they understand, how much they feel, how much they think about things beyond the immediate moment. And the truth is, no one can say for certain. Researchers continue to question whether this period represents a quiet stage before a major cognitive leap in human history, sometimes associated with what is called the cognitive revolution. But the exact timing and nature of that shift remains uncertain. You sit there for a while, letting the warmth of the fire settle into you. The light grows stronger now, the shadows shorten, the world becomes clearer, more defined, and yet in a strange way it also feels more distant. Because you are beginning to understand something. This moment, this place, this entire stretch of human history is not fully visible to us. It exists, but only in fragments, in scattered evidence, in small clues left behind. An entire world mostly quiet, mostly gone. You watch as one person carefully adds a small piece of wood to the fire. The flame responds, flickering slightly, then steadying again. The movement is simple, almost automatic. And yet it carries meaning. Knowledge passed down action, repeated over time. You feel your breathing slow. The rhythm of this place begins to settle into you. There is no urgency here, no sense of rushing towards something, just a steady presence moment by moment. And as you sit there, surrounded by the soft sounds of fire and distant wind, you begin to sense that this is only the beginning. There is much more to this hidden era. Much more that cannot be easily explained, but for now you simply remain where you are, quiet, still, listening. The light continues to spread across the land, slowly replacing the soft grey tones of early morning with something warmer and more defined. You remain seated near the fire for a while, noticing how the group begins to shift with the changing day. Movements become slightly more frequent, though still unhurried, as if guided by an internal rhythm rather than any fixed schedule. Before long, you find yourself rising to your feet again. The air has changed. It is still cool, but there is a subtle difference now, a gentle warmth that hints at what the day will become. You take a slow breath and notice how the scent of smoke lingers faintly on your skin and clothing. It is not unpleasant. In fact, it feels grounding, like a quiet reminder that you belong to this place, at least for now. A mainstream scientific understanding tells us that around 80,000 years ago, the Earth was deep within what we now call the Ice Age. This was not a single uniform freeze, but a long period of shifting climates. Temperatures rose and fell gradually over thousands of years. Glaciers expanded and retreated, and landscapes changed in slow but powerful ways. You begin to notice those changes all around you. The land here feels dry in places, but not lifeless. Grasses grow in uneven clusters, and certain areas appear more fertile, hinting at hidden water sources below the surface. In the distance, you can see darker patches of vegetation, likely marking areas where water collects more consistently. The group begins to move again, and you follow naturally. There is no clear leader giving directions. Instead, the movement feels shared, almost instinctive. One person begins walking, another follows, and soon the entire group flows in the same direction. You fall into step without thinking too much about it. As you walk, you feel the ground shift beneath your feet. Some areas are firm and stable, while others are softer, slightly damp. The variation is subtle but noticeable if you pay attention. And here, attention seems to be everything. A quirky detail that researchers often highlight is how deeply early humans understood their environment, not through written knowledge or formal teaching, but through constant exposure. They learned by living within the land, by noticing patterns over time. The way certain plants grew in specific soils, the way animal tracks changed depending on weather, the way wind carried scent across open ground. You begin to understand that this awareness is not something extra, it is essential. Without it, survival would become uncertain very quickly. The sky above you is clearer now, a soft pale blue stretching endlessly. There are no buildings to interrupt the horizon, no distant sounds of activity, just the occasional call of a bird carried lightly on the air and the soft rhythm of footsteps moving across the land. You might find yourself comparing this to modern life, where information comes quickly and often without effort. A quick search, a simple glance at a screen, and answers appear instantly. But here knowledge is slower. It builds, gradually shaped by experience and memory. Scholars still debate how much of this environmental knowledge was consciously understood versus instinctively learned. Some suggest that early humans developed highly sophisticated mental maps of their surroundings, storing information about water, food, and seasonal changes. Others believe that much of this behavior was guided by immediate observation rather than long-term planning. As you continue walking, you notice something ahead. The land dips slightly, forming a shallow valley. The vegetation here is thicker, greener, and the air feels just a bit cooler. You can sense moisture even before you see it, and then as you move closer, you hear it. Water, a soft, steady sound, almost like a whisper. The group slows as they approach, spreading out slightly as if each person already knows where to go. You follow the sound and soon find yourself standing near a narrow stream. The water moves gently over small stones, catching the light in soft, shifting patterns. You kneel down and touch it. Cold, clear, refreshing. Water sources like this were essential during this period. A well-established historical understanding notes that early human groups often structured their movements around access to reliable water. Streams, rivers, and seasonal pools became natural anchors in an otherwise vast and unpredictable landscape. You watch as others drink some cupping their hands, others using simple containers made from natural materials. The actions are quite efficient and practiced. No one rushes. There is time here, but not endless time. The climate, though calm in this moment, is never fully stable. Over longer periods, it shifts in ways that can reshape entire regions. What is fertile today may become dry in the future. What is accessible now may disappear later. This uncertainty is always present, even if it is not spoken. Researchers continue to question how early humans responded to these long-term environmental changes. Some evidence suggests gradual migration patterns, where groups slowly moved in response to shifting resources. Other findings hint at periods of hardship where survival became more difficult due to sudden changes in climate. As you sit near the water, you begin to feel a deeper connection to this rhythm. Drink when there is water. Move when the land changes. Rest when it is. There is a simplicity to it, but also a quiet complexity. Each decision matters, even if it feels small in the moment. You look up and notice the sky again. A few thin clouds drift slowly, barely noticeable unless you focus on them. The sunlight filters through, gently casting soft shadows across the ground. The temperature continues to rise, but only slightly, just enough to take the edge off the early morning chill. Someone nearby gathers a small cluster of plants, examining them carefully, before placing them into a simple woven container. Another person watches, observing closely, perhaps learning, perhaps remembering. There is no formal teaching here, no structured lessons, and yet knowledge is clearly being passed along. Quietly, Naturally, you begin to walk again after some time, following the group. As they move away from the stream, the water sound fades behind you, replaced once more by the soft rhythm of footsteps and wind. And as you move forward, you start to notice something subtle but important. This world is not static. It's always changing, even if the changes are slowed enough to feel almost invisible. The climate shifts, the land evolves, and the people adapt. You feel it in the air, in the ground beneath your feet, in the quiet awareness shared by those around you. This is not just a place, it is a system. A delicate balance between environment and survival shaped over countless generations. And as you continue walking through this ancient landscape, you begin to realize that understanding this era is not just about what we can see. It's also about what we cannot fully grasp. The patterns that existed but left little trace. The decisions that shaped human history but were never recorded. The quiet moments like this one that slowly guided the course of an entire species. You take one more slow breath, feeling the warmth of the day settling in, and you keep walking. You continue walking with the group, the steady rhythm of footsteps blending softly with the quiet movement of wind across the land. The sun has risen higher now, casting a gentle warmth that rests lightly on your shoulders. It is not harsh, not overwhelming, just present in a calm and predictable way. The space around you feels vast. You glance behind for a moment, noticing how quickly the place you left has faded into the distance. There are no clear paths, no markers left behind, nothing to guide someone back except memory and instinct. It gives you a quiet sense of how enormous this world truly is. A mainstream historical understanding suggests that early human groups during this period were small, often made up of around 20 to 50 individuals. These were not large settlements or permanent communities, but mobile bands that moved together across wide territories, adjusting their location based on food, water, and seasonal conditions. As you walk among them now, you begin to feel the shape of that reality. There is no crowding here, no sense of being surrounded by endless people. Instead, each individual stands out their presence, clear and distinct. You can recognize movements, habits, small patterns in how they walk or pause or observe their surroundings. It feels more personal, more immediate. You notice how the group naturally spreads out as they move. Not too far apart, but not clustered tightly either. There is space between each person, enough to allow for quiet observation of the land, enough to react quickly if something changes. A quirky detail that researchers often point out is that this spacing likely helped early humans stay aware of their environment. Too close together and vision would be limited. Too far apart and communication would become difficult. So they found a balanced one that allowed both awareness and connection. You begin to match that spacing without thinking. A few steps here, a pause there, your movement adjusts subtly, aligning with the rhythm of the group. The ground rises slightly, forming a gentle slope. As you reach the top, the view opens up even more. You can see far into the distance where the land stretches outward in soft layers of colour. Pale grasses, darker patches of trees, and beyond that a faint line where the sky meets the earth. There is something calming about it, and something a little humbling. You might find yourself thinking about how in modern life it's easy to feel surrounded. Cities, buildings, constant movement, but here the opposite is true. Space dominates everything, and within that space your group feels small. Not insignificant, but small in a quiet, grounding way. Scholars still debate how these early groups maintained social bonds over long periods of movement. Some suggest that strong emotional connections were essential for survival, helping individuals cooperate and share resources. Others believe that relationships may have been more fluid, with people joining or leaving groups over time depending on circumstances. As you walk, you begin to notice small interactions that hint at these connections. A brief glance exchanged between two individuals, a subtle gesture almost like a signal guiding direction without words. One person slows slightly, allowing another to catch up. These are small things, easy to overlook, but they carry meaning. You realize that communication here is constant, even in silence. The group begins to slow again as they approach an area where the ground becomes more uneven. Small rocks scatter across the surface, and patches of low shrubs create natural barriers that shape your path. Movement becomes more careful now, more deliberate. You step over a cluster of stones, feeling the shift in balance as your foot finds stable ground again. Nearby, one person pauses and crouches low, examining the earth. You watch as they trace something lightly with their fingers. At first it seems like nothing, just marks in the soil, but then you notice the pattern. Tracks, faint but visible if you know what to look for. A mainstream historical fact is that tracking animals was a crucial skill for early humans. It required not only sharp eyesight, but also the ability to interpret subtle signs. The depth of a footprint, the direction of movement, the time that had passed since it was made. You watch closely as the person studying the tracks tilts their head slightly, as if considering what the marks are saying. A quirky observation often mentioned by researchers is that expert trackers can read the ground almost like a story, understanding events that unfolded hours or even days before. To someone unfamiliar, it might look like random impressions, but to them it holds meaning. You wonder what they see, what they understand in this quiet moment. The group waits patiently, no one rushing the process. There is a shared understanding that this matters, that these small signs could lead to food or warn of danger or guide the next decision. Eventually the person stands and gestures softly. The group shifts direction, just like that. No long discussion, no debate, just a simple change guided by knowledge that feels both precise and instinctive. You follow along, adjusting your path once more. The sun continues its slow climb, and with it the warmth grows slightly stronger. You can feel it on your skin mixing with the faint coolness that still lingers in the air. It creates a balance that feels comfortable, steady. As you walk, you begin to notice something else. There is no sense of rushing toward a destination. The movement itself is the purpose. Finding food, finding water, staying safe. These are goals, yes, but they're not tied to strict timelines. There is no clock counting down, no schedule pressing forward. Time here feels different, slower, more flexible. Researchers continue to question how early humans perceived time. Without written records or mechanical tools, time was likely experienced through natural cycles. The rising and setting of the sun, the changing of seasons, the behavior of animals. You look up again, noticing how the light has shifted since morning. The shadows are shorter now, the colours of the land are more vivid, and yet everything still feels calm. You take a deeper breath, allowing the rhythm of this world to settle into you more fully. The sound of footsteps, the whisper of wind, the occasional distant call of an animal carried faintly across the open space. You begin to feel less like an observer, more like a part of the movement itself. The group continues forward, steady and quiet, each step connecting to the next in a pattern that is likely repeated for generations. And as you walk among them, you start to understand something subtle but important. This way of life is not chaotic. It is not random. It's guided by patterns, by knowledge, by quiet decisions that build over time. Even without written language, even without visible structure, there is order here. A kind of order that is easy to miss if you're not paying attention. You glance once more across the wide landscape, feeling both the openness and the quiet presence of those around you. And then, without thinking too much about it, you take another step forward. Continuing the journey. You continue forward with the group, your steps settling into a quiet rhythm that feels almost automatic now. The land stretches gently ahead, broken only by low shrubs and scattered stones. The sun rests higher in the sky, its warmth now more noticeable, though still soft enough to feel comfortable against your skin. As you walk, your attention begins to shift toward the objects carried by those around you. At first, they seem simple, unremarkable even. But the longer you observe, the more detail begins to emerge. In one person's hand, you notice a shaped piece of stone, its edges carefully chipped into a rough but purposeful form. Another carries a longer object, a wooden shaft tipped, with a sharpened stone point bound together with natural fibres. The construction is not perfect, but it is deliberate. These are tools, and here tools are everything. A widely accepted view among archaeologists is that by 80,000 years ago, humans had already developed a range of stone tools associated with what is often called the Middle Stone Age. These tools were not random fragments, but carefully crafted implements designed for specific purposes, such as cutting, scraping, and hunting. You watch closely as one individual pauses and kneels near a flat stone. They place a smaller piece of rock in their hand and begin to strike it against another harder surface. The sound is sharp but controlled, a quick tap followed by a slight pause, then another. With each strike, small flakes break away, revealing a sharper edge beneath. The process is slow, intentional. You realize that this is not just about making something useful, it is about shaping the world in a small, precise way. An interesting detail that researchers often point out is that tool making requires forward thinking. The maker must imagine the final shape before it exists, adjusting each strike to move closer to that vision. It is not simply reacting, it is planning. You sit nearby for a moment watching the rhythm of the work. Tap, pause, turn, tap again. The flakes fall softly to the ground, collecting in a small scatter of sharp fragments. Each one catches the light briefly before settling into stillness. You might find yourself thinking about how today tools are everywhere. Perfectly shaped, mass-produced, easily replaced. But here each tool carries time within it. Effort, attention, a quiet understanding of materials. The person working the stone pauses and runs their fingers lightly along the edge, testing its sharpness. There is no rush, only a careful assessment. Then, without any visible signal, they continue. Not far away, another member of the group uses a finished tool to scrape along a piece of animal hide. The motion is steady, repetitive, producing a soft rhythmic sound. The hide shifts slightly with each pass, gradually becoming smoother. You can almost feel the texture just by watching. Rough at first, then softer, more flexible. This is how clothing coverings and containers begin. Not in large dramatic steps, but in small repeated actions that slowly transform raw material into something useful. Some researchers suggest that the refinement of tools during this period marks a significant step in human cognitive development, showing not only skill, but also the ability to pass techniques across generations. Others argue that while the tools were effective, the level of innovation may have been gradual rather than sudden. As you observe, it becomes clear that knowledge is present here, but it is not spoken in long explanation. It is shown, one person works, another watches, then perhaps later they will try themselves. You notice a younger individual nearby sitting quietly, eyes fixed on the tool-making process. Their posture is still attentive, not distracted, not restless. Learning without being told that learning is happening. The air around you carries a mix of subtle scents now. Warm earth, dry grass, and the faint mineral smell of freshly broken stone. It is a grounded kind of smell, steady and natural. You shift your position slightly, feeling the ground beneath you again. Small stones press gently against your palm as you steady yourself. The sensation is real, immediate, anchoring you in the moment. The group does not stay in one place for long. After some time, the tool-making slows and people begin to rise again. Objects are gathered carefully but efficiently. Nothing is wasted, nothing is left behind without reason. You stand as well, brushing a bit of dust from your hands, and once again the movement begins. As you walk, you carry with you a new awareness. These tools are not just objects, they are extensions of the body. They allow cutting where hands cannot, reaching where arms fall short, shaping where raw strength would fail. They quietly append what it means to be human. A subtle but fascinating point often raised by archaeologists is that even small improvements in tool design could have significant effects on survival. A sharper edge might mean cleaner cuts. A better hafted spear might increase success in hunting. Over time, these small advantages could shape entire populations. You glance at the tool in someone's hand again. It does not look impressive by modern standards, but here it is powerful. The group moves across a slightly more open stretch of land now, where the vegetation thins and the ground becomes firmer. Your steps feel lighter, more stable. The sun continues to warm the air and a gentle breeze moves across the surface, carrying with it the faint rustle of grass. You begin to notice how often hands are used, touching, testing, adjusting. Everything is felt directly. There are no layers of separation, no insulated barriers. Skin meets stone, wood, fibre, hide. The connection to materials is immediate and constant. You might reflect quietly on how different that is from modern life, where many of the things we use come ready-made, their origins distant and often invisible. Here nothing is hidden. Every object tells a story of where it came from and how it was shaped. As the group continues forward, you realize that this quiet relationship with tools is not separate from life itself. It's woven into every action, every decision, every movement. And as you walk among them, feeling the steady pace and the calm focus that surrounds you, you begin to understand that even the simplest object can carry meaning far beyond its form. A sharp edge, a shaped stone, a piece of wood bound carefully in place. Small things, but in this world they change everything. You continue moving with the group, the steady rhythm of walking now softened by a growing warmth in the air. The sun has reached a gentle height, not yet intense, but strong enough to cast clearer shadows beneath your feet. The land feels quieter again, as if settling into the middle of the day. Gradually the pace slows, not suddenly, not all at once, but in a way that feels almost exempt. One person pauses, another shifts direction slightly, and then without any clear signal, the group begins to gather in a familiar pattern. You notice it before you fully understand it. The fire. At first, it is only a faint trace in the air, that same subtle scent you recognized earlier. Then, as you move closer, you see it. A small, controlled flame sheltered between a few carefully placed stones. It is not large, not dramatic, just steady and alive. You feel its warmth before you reach it. It touches your skin lightly, a gentle contrast to the open air around you. You step closer and lower yourself to the ground, once again joining the others as they settle nearby. There is something different about this moment. The movement has stopped. The constant awareness of walking, watching, adjusting has softened. Here around the fire, the energy shifts into something quieter, more focused inward. A well-established understanding among scientists is that the use of controlled fire became a central part of human life long before this period, possibly hundreds of thousands of years earlier. It provided warmth, helped cook food, and offered protection from predators. But beyond these practical uses, fire also shaped how humans gathered and interacted. You begin to feel that now. The group naturally forms a loose circle. Not perfectly arranged, not symmetrical, but close enough that everyone shares the same space, the same warmth, the same light. An interesting detail often noted by researchers is that firelight may have extended the usable hours of the day. Instead of retreating into darkness at sunset, early humans could remain active, sharing time together in ways that were not possible before. You glance at the flames. They move slowly, rising and falling in a quiet rhythm. Small pieces of wood shift as they burn, releasing soft cracking sounds that blend gently with the surrounding silence. Thin streams of smoke drift upward, carrying with them the scent of charred wood and something slightly sweet beneath it. You breathe it in, it settles into you. Nearby me, someone carefully adjusts a piece of wood, nudging it slightly closer to the center. The movement is small but precise. The fire responds, immediately brightening for a moment before returning to its steady glow. You might wonder how something so simple can feel so important, but sitting here you begin to understand this is not just warmth. This is a place, a point of return. Some researchers propose that fire played a key role in shaping early human social behavior. It created a shared space where individuals could gather, rest, and perhaps even begin to form deeper connections. Others suggest that while fire was essential, its social role may have developed gradually over time, rather than appearing all at once. As you sit among the group, you notice how people settle into stillness. There is no urgency here, no sense of needing to move on immediately. Hands rest loosely, shoulders lower slightly, breathing slows. The constant alertness of walking through open land gives way to something softer. You feel it in yourself as well. A quiet release. One person holds a piece of food over the flame, turning it slowly. The smell changes as it warms, becoming richer, more noticeable. Cooking food, as simple as it may seem, was a significant step in human development. It made certain foods easier to digest, safer to eat, and more efficient as a source of energy. You watch as the person takes a small bite, then lowers the food again, allowing it to cook further. There is patience in every action. Another individual sits nearby, gently rubbing their hands together, perhaps cleaning them, perhaps simply enjoying the warmth. The firelight reflects softly on their skin, creating small flickers of light and shadow. The world beyond the circle feels distant now, even though it is only a few steps away. You might think about how in modern life gathering around a shared space still holds meaning. A dinner table, a quiet living room, a place where people come together at the end of the day. The details have changed, but the feeling remains familiar. Here that feeling may have begun. The fire continues to burn steady and calm. A subtle but fascinating point raised by some scholars is that extended time around fire may have encouraged longer periods of wakefulness, which in turn could have supported the development of more complex communication. With more time spent together in low light, there may have been opportunities for storytelling, for gestures, for shared attention. You glance around the group again. There are small sounds now, soft vocal tones, not quite words as you know them, but not random either. There is rhythm to them, a gentle rise and fall that suggests meaning, carried through sound and expression rather than structured language. Someone makes a quiet gesture with their hand and another responds with a slight movement of their head. Understanding passes between them. You feel it, even if you cannot fully interpret it. The fire crackles softly and a small spark lifts into the air before fading into nothing. The moment passes without reaction, as if such things are simply part of the rhythm. You shift your position slightly, feeling the warmth more directly now. The ground beneath you has begun to absorb some of the heat, making it more comfortable to sit. The contrast between warm and cool areas creates a subtle balance, one that your body adjusts to without effort. Time continues to move, but it feels different here. Slower, more fluid. There is no clear boundary between one moment and the next. Eventually someone reaches for another piece of wood and places it carefully onto the fire. The flames respond again, briefly brightening then settling. The cycle continues. Fuel added. Fire sustained. Warmth maintained. You begin to sense that this is more than just a practical act. It is a responsibility shared by the group. Keeping the fire alive means maintaining comfort, safety, and connection. It is a small task, but one that carries quiet importance. As you sit there, surrounded by the soft glow and gentle sounds, you feel your awareness soften once more. The edges of the world blur slightly. The urgency of movement fades, and for a while you simply remain. Warm, still, part of something that feels both ancient and familiar. You remain seated for a while longer, letting the warmth of the fire settle deeper into your body. The soft crackling continues steady and familiar now, almost like a quiet heartbeat within the group. The air feels balanced, touched by both heat and the gentle coolness that still lingers beyond the circle. Gradually your attention begins to shift again, not toward movement this time, but toward sound. At first it is easy to overlook small vocal tones, subtle shifts in breath, the faint murmur of something that does not quite form into words. But as you listen more closely, you begin to notice patterns. A rise in tone, a pause, a soft repetition. You turn your head slightly, watching two individuals sitting near each other. One makes a low sound accompanied by a small gesture of the hand. The other responds with a similar tone, though not identical, and a slight tilt of the head. There is understanding there, even without language as you know it. A commonly accepted view in human evolution is that by this period early humans likely possessed some form of communication system, though may not have been as complex or structured as modern language. The exact nature of that system remains uncertain, but it likely included vocal sounds, gestures, and shared context. You begin to notice how much is communicated without sound at all. A glance, a shift in posture, the direction of someone's gaze. These small signals carry meaning, guiding behavior in quiet and efficient ways. You might find yourself reflecting on how often even today communication extends beyond words. A look can say more than a sentence. A pause can carry weight. But here that unspoken layer seems to take on even greater importance. An intriguing observation made by some researchers is that early communication may have been deeply tied to rhythm, not just in sound, but in movement. Repeated action shared timing, coordinated gestures. These could have formed the foundation for later developments in language. You listen again. The sounds are not random. They flow. There is a gentle cadence to them, almost like a soft exchange of patterns rather than fixed meanings. Nearby, a person begins tapping lightly on a piece of wood with their fingers. The sound is faint, barely noticeable at first, but it repeats in a steady rhythm. Another person glances over, then shifts slightly, their own movement falling into a similar timing. You might wonder if this is intentional, or simply something that happens naturally. The boundary between the two feels blurred here. The fire continues to flicker, its light dancing across faces and hands, creating small movements of shadow that shift with each change in flame. The visual rhythm mirrors the sounds, creating a quiet harmony that fills the space. Some scholars suggest that this kind of shared rhythm may have played a role in strengthening social bonds. Moving together, sounding together, even in small ways, can create a sense of unity. Others remain uncertain, noting that the evidence for such behaviour is indirect and open to interpretation. You watch as one individual leans slightly toward another, making a series of soft sounds while pointing gently toward the ground. The second person follows the gesture, then nods faintly. A message has been passed. Simple, clear. You begin to understand that communication here is not about precision in the way modern language is. It is about enough clarity to act or respond to remain connected. There is no need for long explanations. The shared environment fills in the gaps. You shift your gaze toward a younger member of the group, again noticing how they observe these exchanges closely. Their eyes move from one speaker to another, tracking gestures, listening to tones. Learning happens quietly through exposure rather than instruction. A small sound escapes them, almost like an imitation. The others do not react strongly, but there is a subtle acknowledgement. A glance, a soft expression, encouragement in its simplest form. You might think about how language today is often taught deliberately, with rules and corrections and structured learning. But here it grows naturally, shaped by repetition and shared experience. The air feels slightly warmer now, the day continuing its slow progression. The fire remains steady, though its intensity has softened slightly as the wood burns down. Someone reaches forward and adjusts it again, maintaining the balance. The sounds continue. Soft voices, gentle rhythms, occasional silence, and the silence itself feels meaningful, not empty. Researchers continue to question when exactly modern language as we understand it fully developed. Some propose that the foundations were already in place during this period, gradually evolving over time. Others suggest that a more significant shift occurred later, bringing about the complexity we see today. As you sit there listening, you begin to feel that this moment exists somewhere in between. Not fully formed, but not absent either. A space where communication is alive but still growing. You take a slow breath, noticing how your own awareness has changed. At first, the sounds felt distant, almost indistinct. But now they feel clearer, more meaningful, even if you cannot translate them into words. You are beginning to listen differently. The fire gives a small crack and a brief burst of sparks rises into the air before fading quickly. No one reacts. The rhythm continues uninterrupted. One person shifts their position, stretching slightly, then settles again. Another leans back, resting their hands behind them, eyes half focused on the flames. There is no pressure to fill every moment with sound. Quiet is part of the communication too. You might reflect gently on how rare that kind of quiet can feel in modern life. Spaces are often filled with noise, with constant input, but here the absence of sound carries its own presence. It allows everything else to stand out more clearly. The crackle of wood, the soft movement of breath, the faint tapping of fingers, all of it becomes part of a shared experience. As time passes, the group remains gathered, the fire holding them together in this small warm circle. The outside world continues to exist, but it feels distant, softened by the glow and the quiet connection within the group. And as you sit there listening to the subtle exchange of sound and sense, you begin to sense that communication is not just about words. It is about presence, about attention, about being part of something shared even in the simplest way. You let that feeling settle in. Calm, steady, unspoken yet understood. You remain near the fire until the warmth begins to feel familiar, almost unnoticed, like a quiet presence that no longer demands attention. The group lingers in this shared space for a while, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the energy begins to shift again. One person stands, then another. The circle loosens, not breaking, just softening at the edges. Movement returns, though it is still gentle, still unhurried. You rise as well, brushing your hands lightly against your legs, feeling the faint dust of the ground. The light has changed. It is no longer the pale clarity of morning or the soft rise of early day. It has deepened slightly warmer now, stretching longer shadows across the uneven land. You notice how the air feels different too, carrying a subtle hint that the day is slowly leaning toward evening. The group begins to move again, but not far this time. They drift toward a slightly elevated area where the ground is dry and open, free from dense vegetation. There are no built structures here, no permanent shelters, nothing that marks this place as a home in the way you might expect. And yet there is a sense of intention, a thoughtful choice. A commonly accepted understanding among archaeologists is that during this period many human groups did not rely on permanent dwellings. Instead, they used temporary resting places adapting to the land rather than reshaping it. Caves, rock overhangs, or simply open ground were often enough depending on the conditions. Here it seems the open ground will do. You watch as individuals begin to settle in different spots, each choosing a place that feels right. Some lie directly on the earth, using nothing more than their own bodies to adjust for comfort. Others gather small amounts of grass or leaves, arranging them into simple bedding. You follow their lead. Lowering yourself carefully, you feel the ground beneath you. It is firm, slightly uneven, but not uncomfortable. You shift slightly, finding a position that supports your body. The texture of dry grass presses softly against your skin, creating a natural cushion. The sky above you is vast. Now clearer than before, it stretches endlessly in every direction. There are no walls, no ceilings, nothing to enclose you. Just open to slowly transitioning toward dusk. You might feel a quiet sense of vulnerability here. Sleeping without shelter, without barriers, exposed to the elements and whatever might pass through the night. And yet the group does not seem anxious. There is awareness, yes, but not fear. A lesser-known observation made by researchers is that early humans may have developed flexible sleeping patterns rather than long uninterrupted rest. Some individuals might sleep while others remained lightly alert, creating a natural system of shared awareness throughout the night. You notice this even now. Not everyone lies down at once. Some remain seated, watching the horizon, listening to the subtle changes in sound that come with the lowering light. Their posture is relaxed but attentive. You lie back fully, allowing your body to rest against the ground. The warmth of the day still lingers held within the earth beneath you. Above the sky begins to shift in colour, soft blues deepening into gentle shades of gold and amber. The transition is slow, almost unnoticeable unless you focus on it. You take a slow breath. The air feels cooler now, brushing lightly across your face. It carries faint scents of dry grass, distant water, and the fading trace of smoke from the fire behind you. A broader interpretation within the study of early human life suggests that sleep during this era was closely tied to natural cycles rather than fixed schedules. Without artificial light, the body responded directly to changes in daylight, gradually slowing as darkness approached. You can feel that happening now. Your thoughts begin to soften. Your breathing becomes more even. The sounds around you shift as well. Daytime activity fades, replaced by quieter, more subtle tones. A distant rustle in the grass. The faint call of an animal somewhere far off. The soft movement of others settling into rest. You turn your head slightly, noticing how the group has arranged itself. Not in a strict formation, but close enough to feel connected. There is space between each person, yet a shared presence that creates a quiet sense of order. You might think about how even today people often sleep better when they feel that others are nearby. Not crowded, not confined, but gently connected. It is a subtle comfort, one that seems to have deep roots. As the light continues to fade, the sky darkens further, and the first faint hints of stars begin to appear. They are soft, at first barely visible, then gradually more defined as the last traces of daylight disappear. You watch them for a moment. There is no urgency to sleep, no pressure to close your eyes immediately, just a slow transition into rest. Some researchers propose that early humans may have experienced segmented sleep-waking briefly during the night before returning to rest. Others are less certain, suggesting that patterns likely varied depending on environment and group behaviour. As you lie there, you sense that sleep here is not a single event. It is a process, a gentle drifting in and out of awareness. Nearby someone shifts position, a sound of grass moving softly beneath them. Another exhales slowly, a long, steady breath that fades into stillness. The temperature continues to drop, though not sharply, just enough to remind you that night has arrived. You feel it on your skin, a cool contrast to the warmth that remains in the ground below. You pull your arms slightly closer to your body, adjusting without thinking. There is no blanket, no constructed comfort, and yet your body adapts. You feel the natural balance between warmth and coolness, between rest and awareness. The sky above is now filled with stars, so many that it almost feels unreal. Without artificial light to dim them, they shine clearly scattered across the darkness in patterns that stretch far beyond what you can follow. You might find yourself wondering if the people around you see meaning in those patterns, if they connect them to stories, to memory, to something beyond the immediate world. The answer is not clear, but the question lingers. As your eyes grow heavier, your awareness begins to soften once more. The sounds of the night continue steady and calm, nothing sudden, nothing sharp, just a quiet presence that surrounds you. You take one more slow breath. The air feels cooler now, softer, and as you lie there beneath the open sky, surrounded by the quiet presence of others, you begin to drift. Not fully asleep, not fully awake, somewhere in between, a state that feels natural, unforced, as if this is how sleep was always meant to be. You rest in that quiet in-between state for a while, your awareness rising and falling gently like the slow movement of breath. The ground beneath you feels steady, holding the warmth of the day just enough to keep the chill from settling too deeply into your body. Above, the stars remain bright, scattered across the sky, in a way that feels almost endless. At some point you open your eyes again, not fully alert, not suddenly awake, just gently aware. The night has deepened. The air feels cooler now, brushing lightly across your skin. You notice the subtle shift immediately. It is not uncomfortable, but it is enough to remind you that this world changes constantly, even in the smallest ways. You turn your head slightly. Some members of the group are still lying quietly, their bodies relaxed, their breathing slow and even. Others are awake, though not in a restless way. One person sits upright, gazing outward into the darkness. Another adjusts their position, then becomes still again. There is no single moment where night begins or ends. It unfolds slowly. A widely accepted view in paleoanthropology suggests that during this long prehistoric period, human groups left very little behind in terms of permanent structures or large-scale evidence. Much of their existence moved lightly across the landscape, leaving only scattered traces, such as stone tools, fragments of bone, or faint signs of fire use. You begin to feel the weight of that absence. This place, this moment feels full, alive, and yet in the distant future it will be almost invisible. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness around you. The ground feels cooler now, where the warmth has faded, and you shift slightly to find a more comfortable balance. Your eyes adjust to the darkness. Shapes begin to form again. The outline of nearby figures, the faint glow of embers still lingering from the fire, now reduced to a low soft light that pulses gently in the night. You notice how quiet everything is. Not silent, but quiet in a layered way. The soft movement of grass in the breeze. A distant animal call, low and brief. The faint crackle of cooling wood. It all blends together into a calm, steady background. An interesting observation often discussed by researchers is that much of early human life may have been shaped by conditions that do not preserve well in the archaeological record. Organic materials decay, footprints fade, even entire camps can disappear without a trace over time. You look around again. There is no mark here that says this place was used. No lasting structure. No carved sign, just temporary presence, and then movement. You notice one individual rise quietly, stepping away from the group with careful, deliberate motions. Their steps are soft, almost soundless as they move toward the edge of the resting area. You follow with your eyes, watching as they pause, scanning the darkness. Awareness never fully disappears here, even in rest. A number of researchers have suggested that early humans maintained a form of shared vigilance during the night. Not through strict shifts or assigned roles, but through natural variation in sleep patterns. Some wake while others sleep, creating a continuous low-level awareness of the environment. You can see that now. No one is fully responsible, and yet the group is never entirely unaware. You draw your knees slightly closer to your body, conserving warmth. The temperature continues to drift downward, though slowly. The air feels clearer now, carrying fewer scents, more stillness. You might think about how different this is from modern nights. Artificial light controlled temperature insulated spaces. Here you feel everything directly. The coolness, the openness, the subtle shifts that signal time passing. You glance upward again. The stars seem brighter now, or perhaps your eyes have simply adjusted more fully. There are so many of them that they blur into faint bands of light stretching softly across the sky. A recurring point in anthropological discussions is that we do not fully understand how early humans interpreted the night sky. Some suggest that even at this stage, patterns may have held meaning, guiding movement or inspiring early forms of belief. Others remain cautious, noting that direct evidence is limited. You let your gaze drift across the stars. There is something calming about their stillness, something grounding. Time feels slower here, more spacious. You lower yourself back down, resting your head against the earth once more. The ground feels firmer now, cooler but still supportive. Your body adjusts, naturally finding comfort without needing perfection. Nearby someone shifts again, then becomes still. The person who moved earlier returns quietly, settling back into place without disturbing the others. Their presence blends back into the group as if they had never left. Everything returns to stillness, and yet you cannot help but feel that this moment is fragile. Not in a dangerous way, but in a fleeting way. Because so much of this time, this era has left so little behind. Researchers continue to question why certain periods of human history appear less visible than others. Some suggest that population sizes were smaller, leaving fewer traces. Others point to environmental conditions that may have erased evidence over time. Whatever the reason, this stretch of history remains partially hidden. You are here experiencing it, and yet it is something that the future will struggle to fully reconstruct. You take a slow breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. The night continues, unrushed, unbroken. The embers near the center glow faintly, their light barely reaching beyond a small circle. Beyond that, darkness stretches outward, soft and deep. You begin to feel your awareness drift again, not from exhaustion, but from the steady calm that surrounds you. Your thoughts become quieter, less defined. The sounds of the night blend into a single, gentle presence. And as you lie there between waking and sleep, you begin to understand something subtle. This era does not announce itself. It does not leave grand monuments or lasting marks. It exists in moments like this, quiet, temporary, almost invisible, and yet deeply real. You let that thought settle, not holding onto it too tightly, just letting it be, as your eyes grow heavy once more, and the night carries you gently back into rest. You drift somewhere between sleep and waking, carried gently by the quiet rhythm of the night. At some point, without any clear moment marking the change, your eyes open again. The darkness has softened. The sky above is no longer deep black, but a muted shade that hints at the coming dawn. The air feels cooler than before, crisp. Still, you take a slow breath and notice how fresh it feels, as if the world has been quietly reset during the night. Around you, the group begins to stir. Not all at once, not with urgency, but gradually. A shift of movement here, a soft exhale there. Someone turns over, adjusting to the changing light. Another sits up slowly, their posture relaxed but aware. You follow that motion, rising gently from the ground. The earth beneath you has cooled now, the warmth of yesterday completely gone. You brush a bit of dry grass from your arms and look out across the land. It feels different again. Morning carries its own kind of silence. Not the deep, enveloping quiet of night, but a lighter, more open stillness. The sounds have changed. Birds call faintly in the distance. The breeze moves with a softer touch. And with it, the day begins again. A widely accepted perspective in archaeology suggests that early human groups did not remain in one place for long. Movement was constant, shaped by the availability of resources. When food became scarce or conditions shifted, groups would gradually move on, sometimes covering large distances over time. You begin to notice signs of that now. There is no effort to rebuild or maintain a long-term camp. No gathering of materials to create lasting structures. Instead, people begin to collect what they need. Tools are picked up, simple items are gathered. Nothing is left behind unless it has no further use. The place where you rested begins to lose its shape. Already it looks less like a camp and more like open land again. An intriguing detail often noted by researchers is how lightly early humans lived on the land. Without heavy possessions or permanent settlements, they could adapt quickly, moving with the environment rather than resisting it. You watch as one person glances toward the horizon, then begins to walk. Another follows, and just like that, the group begins to move once more. You fall into step naturally. There is no clear destination, at least not one that is visible. But there is direction. A subtle pull, guided by memory, by observation, by knowledge that is not spoken aloud. You walk across the same open terrain, but it feels new again in the morning light. The colours are softer now. Pale gold stretches across the grasses. Shadows move gently with the rising sun. The air carries a faint moisture that will soon fade as the day warms. You might think about how today movement often has a defined purpose, a place to go, a schedule to follow, but here movement itself is part of survival. It is not separate from life, it is life. Researchers continue to explore how early humans navigated such vast landscapes without maps or written guidance. Some suggest that they relied on environmental cues such as the position of the sun, the direction of wind, and the patterns of the land. Others believe that memory played a key role with knowledge passed down through generations. As you walk, you begin to notice these cues more clearly. The angle of the sunlight, the slope of the ground, the way certain plants cluster in specific areas, all of it forms a kind of quiet guidance system. You are not lost. Even without knowing exactly where you're going, the group moves steadily, spreading slightly as they walk, each person maintaining that familiar balance between distance and connection. No one strays too far. No one crowds too close. It feels practiced, natural. Ahead, the land begins to change. You notice a gradual shift in texture. The ground becomes firmer, more compact, with fewer loose stones. The vegetation thins slightly, opening the space even more. In the distance, a line of darker shapes begins to take form. Trees, not dense, not forming a forest, but enough to create variation in the landscape. You feel a slight change in the air as well. A hint of shade, a subtle difference in temperature. A number of scholars have suggested that early human movement often followed natural pathways such as river valleys, open plains and edges of wooded areas. These environments offered a balance of resources, making them ideal for travel and temporary settlement. You continue toward the trees. As you approach, the ground softens slightly underfoot. The shade creates a cooler space, a gentle relief from the growing warmth of the morning. The light filters through the branches in soft patterns, shifting as the breeze moves the leaves. You step beneath the first tree and pause for a moment. The difference is immediate. The air feels calmer, more contained. The sounds change as well. The open echo of the plains gives way to a softer, more muted atmosphere. Small movements become more noticeable. A leaf shifting, a branch creaking lightly. The group does not stop completely, but their pace slows. Some reach out to touch the bark of the trees, running their hands lightly along the surface. Others glance upward, scanning the branches. There is always awareness, always observation. A curious point raised in some studies is that early humans may have developed strong spatial memory, allowing them to recognize and remember specific locations over long periods. Even subtle features of the landscape could become meaningful markers. You wonder if this place has been visited before, if it is part of a larger pattern, or if it is simply one step in an ongoing journey. You continue walking through the scattered trees, feeling the shift between light and shadow as you move. The ground is softer here, layered with fallen leaves and small fragments of plant matter. Your steps make quieter sounds absorbed by the surface. The group moves with the same calm rhythm, adjusting naturally to the environment. And as you follow them deeper into this changing landscape, you begin to sense that movement is not just about reaching somewhere new. It is about responding, adapting, listening to what the land offers. You take another slow breath, feeling the coolness of the shaded air. The journey continues, steady, unhurried, guided by patterns that feel both simple and deeply complex at the same time. And without needing to question it too much, you keep walking. You continue beneath the scattered trees, Your steps quieter now as the ground softens under layers of leaves and dry plant matter. The shade offers a gentle relief from the rising warmth, and the air feels slightly more still here, as if held in place by the branches above. The group begins to spread out again, though not as widely as before. The space between each person remains, but there is a subtle closeness now shaped by the boundaries of the trees. Movement becomes slower, more deliberate, as attention shifts towards the immediate surroundings. You notice how people begin to interact with the space differently. One person pauses near a low branch, reaching up to examine it, fingers brushing lightly against the leaves. Another kneels beside a cluster of plants, touching them carefully as if confirming something already known. You find yourself doing the same. Your hand moves toward the bark of a nearby tree, feeling its rough surface beneath your fingertips. The texture is uneven, layered with small ridges and shallow cracks. It feels solid, grounded, unchanged by the passing of time in a way that contrasts with everything else around you. An accepted view among anthropologists is that early human groups relied on a deep familiarity with their environment, not only for survival but for daily decision-making. Plants were not just background elements, they were sources of food, medicine, and material, each one carrying specific knowledge tied to its appearance and location. You watch as someone carefully plucks a small part of a plant and examines it before placing it into a simple container. There is no hesitation, only recognition. A small but fascinating detail often noted in research is that knowledge of edible and non-edible plants required careful learning over time. Mistakes could be costly, so this understanding was likely built gradually and shared within the group through observation and experience. Nearby, a pair of individuals move together, their actions loosely coordinated. One points toward a patch of ground, and the other responds by stepping closer, crouching low to inspect what has been indicated. There is cooperation here, but it is quiet, unspoken. You might reflect on how in modern life roles are often clearly defined. Tasks are assigned, responsibilities are labelled, but her roles seem to shift fluidly. One moment observing, the next gathering, then moving again. There is no rigid structure, and yet nothing feels disorganized. Some researchers propose that this flexibility allowed early human groups to adapt quickly to changing conditions. Without fixed roles, individuals could respond to immediate needs, contributing in different ways depending on the situation. Others suggest that certain patterns of responsibility may still have existed, even if they were less formal. As you walk further through the trees, you begin to notice the presence of others in a new way, not just as individuals, but as part of a shared system. One person moves ahead, slightly scanning the path. Another lingers behind, checking the ground. A third pauses to gather something small and easily missed. Each action connects to the next, forming a continuous flow of awareness and response. You begin to feel that flow yourself. Your steps adjust naturally. Your gaze shifts more frequently. You are no longer simply observing. You are participating. The light continues to filter through the branches, creating soft patterns that shift across the ground. The movement of leaves above creates a gentle flicker, not unlike the firelight from earlier, though cooler, more diffuse. The air carries a faint mix of scents now. Damp earth, crushed leaves, and something slightly sweet from the plants around you. It is subtle but noticeable if you pay attention. You pause briefly as the group gathers near a small clearing. Here the trees open slightly, allowing more light to reach the ground. The space feels balanced, neither fully enclosed nor completely opposing. It creates a natural resting point. Some sit, others remain standing. You lower yourself once more, feeling the softer ground beneath you. It yields, slightly adjusting to your weight in a way that feels more forgiving than the open plains. You glance around at the group. There is no visible hierarchy, no clear leader directing movement, and yet decisions continue to happen. A shift in direction, a pause in movement, a gathering in a particular space. All of it unfolds without instruction. A number of scholars have suggested that early human groups may have operated through shared awareness rather than centralized control. Decisions could emerge from the group as a whole, shaped by observation, experience, and subtle communication. Others remain uncertain, pointing out that leadership, even if informal, may still have played a role in guiding movement and behavior. As you sit there, you sense that both ideas might exist together. Guidance without command, structure without rigidity. You watch as one individual begins to prepare a small bundle of gathered plants, tying them together with a thin strand of fibre. The motion is practiced smooth, requiring little adjustment. Another person observes briefly, then looks away, perhaps already familiar with the process. Learning here does not demand constant attention. It happens over time, through repetition, through presence. You might think about how different that is from modern learning, which often happens in defined moments separated from daily life. But history, knowledge and action are the same thing. There is no separation. The group begins to shift again after some time. Not abruptly, but with a gentle sense of readiness. Those who were sitting rise. Those who were standing begin to move. The clearing slowly empties, returning to stillness as the group continues forward. You stand as well, feeling the softness of the ground give way to firmer earth as you step back onto the path between the trees. The light ahead grows brighter. The air feels warmer again. You follow without hesitation. And as you move with the group, you begin to understand something quiet but important. Life here is not divided into separate parts. There is no clear boundary between work and rest, between learning and doing, between individual and group. Everything flows together, one action leading into the next, one moment shaping the next. You take a slow breath, feeling the rhythm of movement return once more. Steady, calm, continuous, and without needing to think too deeply about where you are going, you continue forward with the others, carried by a system that feels both simple and deeply connected at the same time. You step out from the scattered trees, the light opening around you once more as the land stretches into a broader sunlit space. The transition is gentle but noticeable. The air feels warmer again, and the ground beneath your feet becomes firmer, less cushioned by leaves. The group continues forward, though the pace softens slightly. There is a subtle shift in attention, not toward distant movement or large patterns in the land, but toward something closer, smaller and more immediate. You begin to notice the children. They are not gathered in one place nor separated from the group. Instead, they move within it, woven into the same rhythm as everyone else. Some walk alongside adults, their steps shorter but steady. Others pause more often, drawn to details in the ground or small objects that catch their attention. One child kneels near a cluster of stones, picking one up and turning it slowly in their hands. The movement is careful, almost thoughtful, as if the object itself holds interest beyond its shape. Another watches an adult closely mirroring their movements in a simplified way. When the adult reaches down to examine something, the child does the same, though perhaps less precisely. You slow your pace, slightly observing. An established understanding in anthropology is that early human children likely learned primarily through imitation rather than formal teaching. By watching and repeating the actions of others, they gradually develop the skills needed for survival. There are no lessons here in the way you might expect, no instruction spoken clearly, and yet learning is constant. You notice how adults do not interrupt or correct every small mistake. There is space for exploration, for trial, for quiet observation. Only when something seems important does an adult step in, offering like a brief gesture or a subtle adjustment. A small but interesting point raised by some researchers is that play among early human children may have served a functional role, allowing them to practice essential skills in a low-risk way. Simple actions like throwing, gathering, or mimicking tool use could build coordination and an understanding over time. You see hints of that now. A child picks up a small stick and moves it through the air as if imitating a tool or a gesture they have seen before. The movement is not perfect, but it carries intention. Nearby, another child walks a few steps ahead, then pauses, looking back briefly to ensure they are still within the presence of the group. There is independence, but also connection. You might reflect on how even today learning often begins in similar ways. Watching, trying, adjusting. But here it is more directly tied to the environment. Every action has potential meaning. The ground shifts slightly as you walk, becoming more uneven again. Small rises and dips create a natural variation that requires careful footing. You notice how the children navigate this space. They are attentive, aware, not careless but not overly cautious either. They fall into the same rhythm as the adults, adjusting their steps naturally, learning the feel of the ground beneath them. Some scholars suggest that growing up in such environments may have led to earlier development of certain physical and cognitive skills simply because survival depended on them. Others remain cautious, noting that while adaptation was necessary, development likely varied across different groups and conditions. As you continue, you notice one child stumble slightly on a loose patch of soil. The movement is brief, a momentary loss of balance followed by a quick recovery. An adult nearby glances over but does not intervene. The child steadies themselves, then continues walking. There is trust here, trust in the ability to learn, to adjust, to recover. You find yourself slowing again, watching as a small group gathers near a patch of low plants. An adult kneels and begins to examine them carefully, parting the leaves. A child crouches beside them, leaning in to see more clearly. The adult points gently. The child follows the gesture. No words, just attention shared between them. This is how knowledge moves forward, quietly. Through moments like this, a broader perspective within research suggests that the transmission of knowledge across generations was one of the key factors in human success. The ability to pass on information even without written language allowed each generation to build upon the experiences of the previous one. You begin to feel the importance of that now. Every small action, every observation, it all adds up. The group continues forward after a short pause, the gathering dispersing as naturally as it formed. The children move with them, their energy steady but not restless. They do not lag behind for long. The rhythm of the group holds them in place. The sun climbs higher and the warmth increases slightly. You feel it along your arms, a gentle heat that contrasts with the cooler air that still moves through the space. The sounds of the environment remain soft. Wind through grass, distant movement, occasional quiet vocal tones. You might think about how childhood here is not separated from the rest of life. There is no distinct boundary between learning and living. Everything is part of the same flow. The group reaches another open stretch of land and the spacing between individuals widens again. The children adjust naturally, maintaining their place without needing to be directed. You notice how often they look at the ground, at the people around them, at the distance ahead, always observing, always taking in information. A subtle idea proposed by some researchers is that curiosity itself may have been a key trait in human survival. The desire to explore, to notice, to understand could have driven learning in ways that formal instruction never could. As you walk alongside them, you begin to feel that same curiosity, not in a restless way, but in a quiet, attentive way. You notice more. Small changes in colour, variations in texture, the rhythm of movement around you. And as you continue forward with the group, surrounded by both experience and learning, happening at the same time, you begin to understand something simple. Growth here does not happen in separate stages. It happens continuously, with each step, each glance, each quiet moment of observation. And without needing to pause or reflect too deeply, you move forward with them, carried along in a process that feels as natural as breathing. You continue walking alongside the group, the steady rhythm of movement returning once more. The sun now rests higher in the sky, casting a warmer light that spreads evenly across the land. Shadows shorten, and the colours around you feel more defined, more grounded in the fullness of the day. The air carries a faint dryness, not uncomfortable but noticeable. You feel it on your skin, a subtle reminder that water and shade will matter again before long. The group begins to slow, not all at once, but in small adjustments. A few people drift toward a patch of low vegetation where the ground appears slightly richer. The colour of the plants is deeper here, more vibrant than the surrounding grasses. You follow, curious. As you approach, you notice how carefully the plants are examined. Hands move gently, parting leaves, lifting stems, inspecting textures. Nothing is taken immediately. There is always a moment of recognition first. An established view among archaeologists is that gathering plant foods formed a significant part of early human diets. While hunting often draws more attention, plant gathering likely provided a steady and reliable source of nutrition, especially in environments where large game was not always available. You kneel slightly, bringing yourself closer to the ground. The plants here vary in shape and size. Some have small clusters of seeds. Others carry thicker leaves, slightly waxy to the touch. You notice how one individual selects only certain parts, leaving the rest behind. There is precision in the choice. A small but meaningful observation often highlighted in research is that knowledge of edible plants could include not only which species to select, but also which parts to use and at what time. Some plants are safe only during certain stages of growth. Others require preparation to be consumed. You watch as a person carefully removes a small section of a plant and places it into a woven container. The movement is practiced, efficient, but never rushed. Nearby, another individual tastes a small portion, pausing briefly before continuing. You might wonder how they know, how they learned which plants are safe, which are useful, which should be avoided. Some researchers suggest that this knowledge was built slowly over generations through observation and shared experience. Others propose that trial and error may have played a role, though likely with caution given the risks involved. You reach out and touch one of the leaves yourself. It feels cool, slightly firm. You notice a faint scent as your fingers brush against it, something subtle but distinct. It lingers for a moment before fading into the air. The group spreads out slightly within this patch, each person focusing on a different area. There is no competition, no urgency to gather everything at once. Instead, the process feels balanced. Take what is needed, leave what is not. You begin to understand that this is not random. It is guided by awareness. A broader interpretation within anthropological research suggests that early humans may have developed sustainable gathering practices, not out of abstract planning, but through repeated interaction with the environment. Overharvesting could lead to scarcity, so patterns of use may have naturally adjusted over time. As you move through the patch, you notice the ground beneath your feet again. It is softer here, slightly damp in places, suggesting that water may be present below the surface, and the plants seem to cluster in these areas, creating small pockets of abundance within the wider landscape. You crouch lower, observing more closely. Small insects move quietly among the leaves, tiny shifts of motion that would be easy to miss if you were not paying attention. The entire space feels alive, though, in a subtle, almost hidden way. A quiet thought crosses your mind. How much of this world goes unnoticed when attention is elsewhere? Here, attention is everything. The group continues gathering for some time, though it is difficult to measure how long. There is no clear signal marking the end. Instead, it happens gradually. Containers become filled, movement slow, people begin to rise. You stand as well, brushing your hands lightly against your legs. The sun feels warmer now, pressing gently against your skin. The air carries fewer cool traces than before. You can sense that the day is moving forward even without looking at the sky. One person adjusts the contents of their container, ensuring everything is secure. Another takes a small drink from a simple vessel, then passes it along. There is sharing here, not as an event, but as a natural part of the process. Some scholars suggest that cooperation in food gathering and distribution was a key factor in human survival, allowing groups to support one another during times of scarcity. Others note that while cooperation was important, the exact patterns of sharing may have varied depending on group dynamics. As you look around, you sense that what matters most here is balance. Between taking and leaving, between individual effort and group benefit, the group begins to move again, leaving the patch of plants behind. Already it begins to look unchanged, as if the gathering never happened. You take a few steps forward, then glance back briefly. The space remains quiet, undisturbed. It feels almost as if the land absorbs each interaction, returning to stillness once it is over. You turn forward again and continue walking. The rhythm resumes, step by step. The warmth of the day settles in more fully now, and the air feels steady, carrying only the faintest movement of breeze. You notice how your own awareness has shifted once again. You look more closely. You move more carefully. You feel more connected to the details around you. And as you follow the group across the open land, carrying the quiet knowledge of what you have just observed, you begin to understand something simple but essential. Survival here is not about force. It is not about dominance. It is about attention. Careful, patient attention to a world that offers what is needed if you know how to see it. You take another slow breath and keep moving forward. You move forward with the group, the warmth of the day now fully settled across the land. The air feels steady, no longer carrying the cool traces of morning. The ground beneath your feet is firm again, stretching outward in open space with only occasional clusters of vegetation. There is a subtle shift in the group's behaviour. It is not obvious at first, but gradually you begin to notice it. The spacing changes slightly. People move with a different kind of focus. Their gaze extends further ahead, scanning the distance more often than before. Movements become quieter, more controlled. Something is different. You follow their attention. At first you see nothing, just the same open landscape gently rising and falling in soft patterns. But then slowly your eyes begin to adjust. A slight disturbance in the grass. A faint line of movement that does not match the wind. Animals. Not close, but not too far either. A broadly accepted understanding in archaeology is that hunting during this period relied less on sudden bursts of force and more on patience, observation and coordination. Early humans did not dominate their environment. They worked within it using strategy rather than strength alone. You feel the shift in energy around you. The group slows even more. Each step becomes deliberate, careful. You lower your own pace, matching theirs. No one speaks, but communication continues. A slight gesture of the hand, a glance held for just a moment longer, a change in posture. It is enough. An interesting observation made by some researchers is that persistence hunting may have been one method used by early humans where prey was tracked and followed over long distances until it became exhausted. Others suggest that ambush techniques were also common, depending on the terrain and the type of animal. You watch as one individual crouches slightly, their body lowering closer to the ground. Another moves to the side, adjusting their position to create a wider arc. There is no rush, no sudden movement, only preparation. You feel your breathing slow. Even without fully understanding the plan, your body responds to the atmosphere. The quiet focus, the shared attention, it draws you in. The animals ahead continue moving unaware, or only faintly aware of the presence behind them. Their shapes become clearer now. Medium size moving in a loose group, grazing occasionally as they walk. You notice how the hunters position themselves, not directly behind, not directly in front, but around, creating space, guiding movement without forcing it. You take a careful step, placing your foot softly against the ground. The sound is minimal, almost lost within the natural noise of the environment. The distance closes slowly, very slowly. A small but fascinating detail often highlighted in research is that successful hunting often depended on understanding animal behavior, knowing how they move, how they react, how they sense danger. This knowledge allowed early humans to act with precision rather than relying on chance. You see that knowledge in action now. The group does not move randomly. Each step seems to anticipate the next. One person shifts slightly, causing the animals to adjust their direction. Another moves in response, maintaining the overall pattern. It feels like a quiet conversation, not between humans, but between humans and the animals themselves. Some scholars suggest that this level of coordination required a high degree of shared understanding even without complex language. Others remain cautious, noting that while cooperation was likely, the exact methods are still being studied. You feel the tension build, though it is not sharp or overwhelming. It is steady, controlled, the kind of focus that stretches time. Moments feel longer here, more detailed. You notice the sound of your own breath, the slight movement of grass against your legs, the distant shifting of the animals ahead. Everything becomes clearer. Then a change. One of the animals lifts its head, pausing. Its body stiffens slightly. Awareness. The group responds instantly, though still without sudden motion. They adjust, holding their positions, allowing the moment to settle rather than forcing it forward. The animal lowers its head again. The movement continues. You feel a quiet release. The process resumes. Gradual, measured. You begin to understand that this is not about a single moment of action. It is about a sequence, a series of small decisions, each one building on the last. Eventually the spacing tightens. The animals are closer now. The group has guided them into a more controlled area where movement becomes limited. The terrain shifts slightly, creating natural boundaries that make escape more difficult. The final stage approaches, but even now there is no rush. A deeper perspective within archaeological research suggests that hunting success rates were not always high, and that many attempts may have ended without a catch. Patience, therefore, was essential. Effort could not be wasted in reckless action. You sense that patience here. Even at this moment, the group holds, waits, then a sudden shift. Not chaotic, but decisive. Movement breaks the stillness. Quick! Precise. You see the coordinated action unfold, each person moving in alignment with the others. The details blur slightly in your perception, not from speed alone, but from the intensity of the moment. Then stillness returns. Gradually, the movement slows. The animals scatter, but one remains. The group gathers. There is no loud celebration, no dramatic reaction, only a quiet acknowledgement of what has happened. You stand there feeling the shift in energy once more. From focus to completion, a practical outcome has been achieved. Food, sustenance, the result of patience and understanding. You watch as the group begins to move again, this time toward the result of their effort. Their movements are steady, composed, already transitioning into the next stage. And as you follow, you begin to understand something important. Hunting here is not about dominance. It is not about control. It is about alignment. Working with the patterns of the world rather than against them. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth of the day and the quiet intensity that still lingers in the air. And then, without hesitation, you continue forward with the group. You move closer with the group, the quiet intensity of the hunt slowly settling into something calmer. The animal lies still now, its presence no longer part of movement but part of the land again in a different way. There is no rush to begin, no sudden urgency. Instead there is a pause, a moment of stillness. You stand nearby, noticing how the group gathers around, not tightly, but with quiet attention. Each person seems to understand what comes next without needing direction. A well-supported idea in archaeological studies suggests that once an animal was secured, the process of preparing it began quickly, not out of haste but out of necessity. Meat could spoil and other animals might be drawn to the scent, so efficiency mattered. You watch as one individual kneels and brings forward a stone tool, its edge catching the light, briefly. The motion that follows is careful and practiced, not forceful but precise. There is no waste in the movement. Every action has purpose. The others begin to assist, each taking on a part of the process. Some gather nearby materials, others remain watchful, their attention shifting outward toward the surrounding land. Awareness does not fade here. Even in this moment, a lesser-known detail that researchers often mention is that early humans likely used nearly every part of an animal. Meat for food, bones for tools, hides for clothing or shelter. Nothing was discarded without reason. You begin to see that clearly. The work unfolds steadily, each step following naturally from the last. Hands move with familiarity, guided by repetition and shared experience. There is no visible hesitation, no uncertainty in the actions. You might feel a quiet respect for the process. Not dramatic, not ceremonial in an obvious way, but grounded, intentional. Some researchers suggest that early humans may have developed a sense of awareness around the act of taking life, even if it did not resemble later forms of ritual or belief. Others caution that such interpretations are difficult to confirm, as evidence from this period is limited. As you stand there, you sense something subtle, a kind of stillness within the activity. The sounds are soft, the movement is steady. Nothing is questioned. You shift your gaze outward for a moment. The land remains open, unchanged by what has just occurred. The breeze continues to move through the huge grass. Distant shapes remain distant, the world does not pause for this moment. And yet within the group, something has shifted. Purpose has been fulfilled. Energy has changed. You notice how one person pauses, briefly lifting their head and scanning the horizon again. The awareness never fully disappears. It moves in cycles, rising and settling as needed. You might think about how in modern life moments like this are often hidden from view. Food arrives prepared, separated from its source. The process is distant, removed. But here nothing is hidden. Everything is seen. Everything is understood. The work continues, gradually transforming the animal into usable parts. Pieces are set aside, organized in a way that makes sense to those involved. The movements remain efficient but never rushed. A number of scholars have noted that cooperation during this stage would have been essential. Processing food required time and coordination, and working together increased both speed and safety. You see that cooperation clearly. No one acts alone, no one directs the others, and yet everything moves forward smoothly. The sun continues its steady path overhead, its warmth now more noticeable against your skin. The air feels slightly heavier, carrying faint traces of scent from the work being done, though it is not overwhelming. You take a slow breath, grounded, present. Nearby, a few individuals begin preparing to carry portions of the result. Simple bindings are used, securing pieces in a way that allows for movement without loss. The process is practical, shaped by necessity. A subtle observation sometimes discussed in research is that the ability to transport food may have influenced how far groups could travel and how they structured their movements. Carrying resources allowed for greater flexibility, reducing the need to remain in one place. You watch as the group begins to shift again. The work nears completion. The space that once held focused activity begins to return to quiet. There are no lasting marks left behind, no structure to indicate what happened here, only the memory carried forward. You glance once more at the ground, then back to the group, and as they begin to move, you follow. The rhythm resumes, step by step. The intensity of the hunt has passed, replaced by a steady sense of continuation. There is no lingering celebration, no extended pause to reflect. Life moves forward, always. You walk with the group as they leave the area behind the land, gradually returning to its earlier stillness. The breeze shifts again, carrying away the last traces of scent. The open space stretches ahead once more unchanged. You begin to feel the weight of the moment settle into you. Not heavy, but present. A quiet understanding of how survival unfolds here. Not through isolated events, but through connected action, each step leading into the next. You take another slow breath, feeling the warmth of the day, the steady rhythm of movement, the quiet awareness that surrounds you. And without needing to think too deeply about what comes next, you continue walking with the group, carried once more into the ongoing flow of life in this ancient world. You walk on with the group, the steady rhythm returning once again after the quiet intensity of the hunt. The land stretches open ahead, the sun, now beginning its slow descent, softening slightly as the day moves toward its later hours. The light feels warmer, more golden, resting gently across the grasses and the scattered shapes of trees in the distance. Your attention begins to shift again, not toward movement this time, but toward the people themselves. More specifically, what they wear. At first, it seems simple, unremarkable, but the longer you observe, the more detail begins to reveal itself. You notice the materials first, layers of animal hide shaped loosely around the body. Some are draped across the shoulders, others are wrapped more tightly secured with simple ties made from plant fibers or strips of leather. The shapes are not uniform, but they follow a quiet logic. Function over form. A widely accepted view in archaeology is that early humans developed clothing primarily for protection against environmental conditions. Temperature, wind and terrain all influenced what was worn. In colder regions, thicker hides provided insulation. In warmer areas, lighter coverings offered protection without trapping too much heat. You feel the air against your own skin. The warmth of the day is still present, but you can sense how quickly that could change as evening approaches. Clothing here is not decorative in the way you might expect. It is practical, and yet there is something more. A subtle variation in how each person arranges what they wear. One wraps their covering higher around the shoulders. Another leaves one arm more free, perhaps for easier movement. Small adjustments that reflect individual preference within shared necessity. A lesser-known detail often discussed by researchers is that early clothing may have also played a role in social signaling even in simple ways. The way materials were prepared, worn or maintained could carry meaning within the group, though the exact nature of that meaning is not fully understood. You watch as one individual pauses to adjust a piece of hide, pulling it slightly tighter. As a breeze moves through the open space, the motion is automatic, practiced over time. Nearby, another person uses a stone tool to scrape gently along a section of material they carry. The action smooths the surface, making it more flexible. You recognize this as part of the same process you observed earlier. Preparation. Maintenance. Clothing is not something finished. It is something ongoing. You reach out briefly, brushing your fingers against a piece of hide as someone passes nearby. The texture is firm but not rigid. It carries a slight warmth from the body, softened by repeated use. You might find yourself thinking about how different this is from modern clothing. Manufactured, standardized, easily replaced. Here each piece holds time within it. Effort, attention, care. Some researchers propose that the development of more advanced clothing may have allowed early humans to expand into new environments, adapting to colder regions that would otherwise have been difficult to survive in. Others suggest that while clothing was important, it was only one part of a larger system of adaptation. As you walk, you begin to notice how often people adjust their coverings. A slight shift as the wind changes, a repositioning as the body warms, a tightening or loosening depending on movement. It is a constant dialogue between the body and the environment. You feel it yourself, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the cooler air moving beneath it, the subtle balance that clothing helps to manage. The group continues across the open land, the light now beginning to stretch longer shadows once more. The day is slowly preparing to close, though there is still time before darkness returns. You notice how the pace remains steady, not hurried, not slowed, just consistent. A quiet observation sometimes raised in anthropological discussions is that clothing may have also influenced how humans perceived their own bodies, creating a sense of boundary between self and environment. While difficult to confirm, it suggests that even simple coverings could have subtle effects beyond physical protection. You consider that as you walk, how something as basic as a layer of material can change how you feel in space. More protected, more contained, more aware of the difference between inside and outside. Nearby, a child adjusts their own small covering, imitating the movements of an adult. The action is not perfect, but it is purposeful. Learning continues even in these small details. The group moves toward another gently sloping area where the ground rises slightly before leveling out again. The air feels a bit cooler here, the breeze more noticeable as it moves across the higher ground. You pull your arms slightly closer to your body, responding without thinking. Clothing shifts again, adapts. A broader perspective within research suggests that early human adaptation was not based on a single innovation, but on a combination of many small developments. Tools, fire movement, and clothing all work together, each supporting the others in subtle ways. You begin to see that clearly now. Nothing stands alone. Everything connects. The sun lowers further, and the light softens once more, taking on that familiar golden tone that signals the approach of evening. The group continues forward their movements, unchanged, their rhythm steady. You glance around, noticing once again the balance between individuality and unity. Each person moves in their own way, adjusts their clothing in their own way, and yet the group remains connected, coordinated. You take a slow breath, feeling the air, the light, the texture of the world around you. And as you continue walking, you begin to understand something quiet but meaningful. Clothing here is not just about protection, it is about adaptation, a constant response to a world that never stays the same. You adjust your posture slightly, feeling the subtle interplay between warmth and coolness, between exposure and coverage. And then, without needing to pause, you take another step forward. Continuing the journey, you continue forward as the light softens the day, slowly leaning toward evening once more. The air cools just enough to be noticeable, brushing lightly against your skin and slipping beneath the edges of what you wear. The rhythm of the group remains steady, though there is a subtle shift again, something quieter, more inward. The land ahead opens into a gentle rise where the ground becomes smoother and less broken by vegetation. It feels like a place that has been used before, though nothing marks it clearly, no structure, no sign left behind. And yet there is familiarity in how the group approaches it. They slow, they gather, not in urgency, but in quiet recognition. You follow, stepping onto the slightly elevated ground. The view stretches outward, allowing a clear look across the surrounding landscape. The horizon feels wider here, more visible, as if the world itself has opened just a little more. The sun lowers further, its light turning softer, warmer, settling into tones of amber and gold. The group begins to arrange themselves loosely across the space. Some sit, some remain standing, others move slowly, collecting small items from the ground. Stones, pieces of wood, nothing large, nothing elaborate. At first it seems like simple preparation, but then you notice something different. The movements are not purely practical. They carry a certain rhythm, A repetition. One person places a small stone in front of them, then another beside it. The placement is not random. There is spacing, a quiet pattern forming though its meaning is not immediately clear. You watch more closely. Another individual sits nearby, holding a small object in their hands, turning it slowly as the light fades. Their gaze is focused, not distracted, as if the object holds more than its physical form. A broadly supported idea in anthropology suggests that by around this period early humans may have begun to show signs of symbolic thinking. This includes behaviours that go beyond immediate survival, such as the use of pigments, ornaments, or arranged objects. You begin to sense that here, not as something obvious, but as something subtle. An interesting point raised in some studies is that ochre, a natural pigment, has been found at archaeological sites dating back tens of thousands of years. It may have been used for body decoration marking objects or other purposes that are not fully understood. You glance around wondering if such materials are present here. You do not see clear evidence, but you feel the possibility. The group remains quiet. The sounds of the day have softened. The wind moves gently across the open ground, carrying faint traces of scent and distant movement. The light continues to fade, deepening the shadows around you. You sit down slowly, allowing yourself to become still once more. Nearby, one individual traces a shape lightly in the soil with their fingers. The motion is slow, deliberate, as if repeating something familiar. Another watches, not interrupting, simply observing. There is no explanation offered, no attempt to clarify what is being done, and yet it does not feel meaningless. Some researchers propose that these early forms of symbolic behaviour may represent the beginnings of belief systems, or at least the ability to assign meaning beyond the immediate physical world. Others remain cautious, suggesting that while such behaviours are intriguing, their interpretation is still uncertain. You watch the tracing in the soil again. The shape is simple. Curved lines, a repeated motion. It could be nothing, or something. The ambiguity remains. You might find yourself reflecting on how meaning often begins quietly. A repeated action, a shared recognition, something that feels important even if it cannot yet be fully explained. The group sits together as the light continues to fade. The sky shifts into deeper tones, the warmth of the day slowly giving way to the coolness of approaching night. The first faint stars begin to appear again, just visible against the darkening blue. One person lifts their head, looking upward for a moment, then lowers it again. There is no dramatic gesture, no clear sign of ritual. And yet there is a feeling of pause, a moment that feels slightly different from the rest. A subtle observation sometimes discussed in anthropological research is that early human awareness of the natural world, including the sky, may have played a role in the development of belief or symbolic systems. Patterns, cycles, and repeated observations could have carried meaning, even if that meaning was not expressed in structured ways. You sit quietly feeling the shift, and the group is not resting in the same way as before. This is something else, not activity, not sleep. Something in between, a shared stillness. You notice your own breathing slow again. The world around you feels softer, less defined. The edges of things blur slightly as the light fades. The sounds become more distant, more subtle. Someone near you places another small object on the ground. Carefully, intentionally. No one reacts, and yet it is seen. You begin to understand that not everything here needs explanation. Some things simply exist. Actions that carry meaning within the group, even if that meaning cannot be easily translated. The night continues to approach. The temperature drops slightly, just enough to be felt. You pull your arms closer, adjusting naturally. The group remains gathered on the elevated ground, the space holding them together in a quiet shared presence. And as you sit among them watching these small deliberate actions unfold, you begin to sense something subtle but important. This is not just survival, not just movement, not just gathering or hunting. There is something else emerging here, something quieter, less visible, but deeply human. You let that thought settle gently, not holding onto it too tightly, just allowing it to exist. As the last light of the day fades and the night begins to take its place once more, You remain seated as the last traces of daylight fade the sky, deepening into a calm and endless dark. The air cools further, settling gently around you, and the ground beneath feels firm and steady, holding just a faint memory of the day's warmth. For a while, everything is quiet, not empty but layered, the kind of quiet that holds distant sounds, small movements, subtle shifts in the world beyond your immediate view. You glance across the group. Some are still, others shift slightly, adjusting their position as the night settles in. The earlier moment of quiet focus of small gestures and patterns has softened. The group now rests again in a more familiar rhythm, and yet something feels different. You sense it not in what is seen but in what is implied, a presence beyond the group. You lift your gaze toward the open darkness beyond the circle. At first there is nothing, just the outline of land fading into shadow. But then slowly your awareness sharpens. A movement, subtle, distant, not part of your group. You remain still watching. Others seem to notice as well, though no one reacts abruptly. A few heads turn slightly, a shift in posture here, a pause there. The awareness spreads quietly like a ripple through still water. A widely recognized understanding in paleoanthropology is that during this period early modern humans were not alone on the landscape. Other human species such as Neanderthals lived in various regions, sometimes overlapping in time and space. You feel that possibility now, not as a clear sight, but as a quiet tension in the air. The movement in the distance pauses, then continues. It is difficult to see clearly, but you sense that it is not animal. The pattern is different, more deliberate, more measured. Another group, perhaps. You remain still, your breathing slow, controlled. The group around you does not move closer together, but there is a subtle tightening of awareness. Each person seems more present, more attentive to the space beyond the immediate circle. There is no panic, only recognition. An interesting point raised by researchers is that encounters between different human groups may have ranged from neutral to cooperative or even tense, depending on the circumstances. Evidence suggests both interaction and separation, though the nature of these encounters is still not fully understood. You watch as one individual in your group shifts slightly, their body angled toward the distant movement. Not aggressive, not inviting, just aware. The distance remains. The shapes in the darkness do not approach. They move slowly along the edge of visibility, then begin to fade their presence, dissolving back into the night. Gone. Or simply beyond your beat. The tension softens, gradually. You feel it release in your own body as well. A slow exhale, a return to stillness. Some researchers suggest that early humans developed ways to recognize others through movement patterns, posture, or even sound, allowing them to distinguish between familiar and unfamiliar groups. Others question how reliable such distinctions would have been in low light or at a distance. As you sit there, you realize that certainty may not have been necessary. Awareness was enough. The group does not speak of what has just occurred. There is no visible reaction, and yet the moment lingers. You notice how one person remains upright a little longer than before, watching the direction where the movement disappeared. Another shifts closer to the faint glow of the fire's embers, though not in fear, more in quiet adjustment. The night continues, unchanged, and yet you feel that something has been added to it. A reminder that this world is shared, not only with animals, but with others who move, think and observe in ways that may be both similar and different. You lie back slowly, returning your body to the ground. The sky above is clear again, filled with stars that stretch endlessly across the darkness. They seem unchanged by what has just happened, steady and distant. You take a slow breath. The air feels cool and calm. The sounds return to their earlier rhythm. Wind through grass, distant calls, the soft presence of others resting nearby. You might find yourself wondering what those distant figures were like, how they lived, what they understood, whether their thoughts were similar to yours in this moment. The questions remain unanswered. A subtle idea often discussed in human evolution studies is that interaction between different human groups may have influenced development in unexpected ways through shared knowledge or even genetic exchange. But the details are still being explored and much remains uncertain. You let your thoughts settle, not searching for answers, just allowing the moment to exist. The presence, the distance, the quiet crossing of paths without contact. You feel your body relax again, the earlier tension fading into the steady calm of the night. Around you, the group settles fully once more. Breathing slows, movement quiets. The world returns to its gentle rhythm, and as you lie there beneath the vast sky, you begin to understand something subtle. You are not alone in this time, not alone in this world. Even in its vastness, even in its quiet, there are others, moving, living, existing just beyond your sight. You close your eyes slowly, letting that awareness drift with you. Not unsettling, not heavy, just present, as the night carries you gently back into rest once more. You drift again in that quiet space between sleep and waking, where thoughts feel softer and time seems to move without clear edges. The memory of distant movement lingers faintly, but it does not disturb the calm. It settles somewhere deeper, becoming part of the background rather than something urgent. When you open your eyes once more, the night is still present. The stars remain steady above you, though a subtle change in the sky suggests that time has passed. The air feels slightly different, cooler yet calmer, as if the world has settled into its deepest rest. You remain still for a moment, listening. The sounds are gentle, a faint rustle in the distance, the slow rhythm of breathing from those nearby, the soft whisper of wind moving across the open land. Nothing demands your attention, and yet your awareness feels sharper, as if something within you has shifted. You sit up slowly, your body adjusting to the cool ground beneath you. The faint glow of embers is still visible, barely lighting the immediate space. Beyond that, darkness stretches outward, deep and quiet. Your gaze moves across the group. Most are resting. Some stir lightly, their movements small and brief. One person sits upright, not tense but alert in a quiet, steady way. You notice how natural this rhythm feels now. Rest, awareness, rest again. A widely accepted interpretation in studies of early human behavior suggests that cognition during this period was already complex, though expressed differently than in modern life. Problem-solving, memory and social awareness were present, even if they were not structured through language in the same way. You begin to sense that complexity now. Not as something invisible, but as something woven into the way people move, observe, and respond. You look down at your hands resting lightly against the ground. They are still, but your thoughts are not. They move quietly, reflecting on what you have seen. The movement of the group, the patterns in behavior, the subtle coordination without instruction. It feels familiar, and yet distant. An interesting idea discussed among some researchers is that the human mind during this era may have been capable of symbolic thought in certain contexts, but not consistently applied across all aspects of life. In other words, moments of deeper reflection may have existed even if they were not constant. You consider that, the possibility that awareness itself comes and goes, that there are moments when the mind reaches further, then returns to the present. You feel that now? A brief expansion of thought, then a settling back into stillness. The night holds you in that balance. Nearby, someone shifts slightly, drawing their legs closer to their body. Another adjusts their position, then becomes still again. These small movements continue part of the natural rhythm of rest. You might think about how even today the mind does not remain in one state. It moves between focus and wandering between clarity and quiet. Here that movement feels more noticeable, more connected to the environment. The absence of constant distraction allows each thought to stand out more clearly, even if only for a moment. You glance upward again. The stars remain unchanged, but your perception of them feels different now. Not just points of light, but something larger, something that stretches beyond immediate understanding. Some scholars have proposed that early humans may have begun to form abstract concepts during this period, though evidence remains limited. Others suggest that while perception was rich, the ability to organize those perceptions into structured ideas may have developed later. You let that question rest, not needing to answer it, just observing the feeling it creates. A quiet curiosity. The air shifts slightly. A faint breeze moving across the ground. It brushes against your skin, cool but not uncomfortable. You feel it, then it passes. Time continues, unmarked, unmeasured, and yet you sense its movement. The night slowly deepens, then begins its gradual transition toward morning, though the change is almost too subtle to notice directly. You lie back again, allowing your body to rest fully. The ground supports you, the air surrounds you. The sounds continue in their soft, steady rhythm. your thoughts begin to slow once more, not stopping completely, but softening. You reflect briefly on the day, the walking, the gathering, the hunt, the quiet moments around the fire. Each one feels connected, part of a larger pattern. A broader perspective in human evolution research suggests that this period may represent a stage where many foundational aspects of human behavior were already present, even if they had not yet developed into the forms we recognize today. You begin to understand that idea more clearly now. Nothing here feels incomplete, just different. A version of humanity that is both familiar and not fully formed. You take a slow breath. The air feels cool and steady. Your body relaxes again, settling deeper into the ground. The stars remain above you, quiet and distant. And as your awareness begins to drift once more, you feel that gentle pull toward rest. The kind that does not demand, does not rush, just invites. You let your eyes close, your thoughts fade, and the night carries you once more into a calm and steady sleep. You wake again, though this time the transition feels smoother, almost expected. The darkness has softened into a dim early light, and the sky carries that quiet grey tone that comes just before the sun begins to rise. The air is cool, not sharply cold, but very fresh in a way that clears your senses. You take a slow breath and sit up, noticing how the group around you begins to stir once more. The rhythm is familiar now. Subtle movements, gentle shifts, the quiet return from rest into awareness. No one rushes. There is no sudden start to the day. It unfolds, gradually. You rise to your feet, brushing away the faint traces of dust and dry grass from your arms. The ground beneath you feels firm again, holding a slight chill that will soon disappear as the light strengthens. As your eyes adjust to the growing brightness, you notice something different about the landscape ahead. A change in shape. A gentle dip in the land stretching outward in a long, shallow curve. The group begins to move in that direction. You follow. The light grows steadily as you walk, revealing more detail with each step. The grasses here are thicker, more varied in colour. Some patches carry a deeper green while others remain pale and dry. The ground slopes downward, gradually at first, then more clearly, and with it the air changes. You feel it before you see it. A faint coolness. A slight increase in moisture. Then the sound. Soft, continuous, water. A commonly accepted understanding in environmental archaeology is that rivers and valleys played a crucial role in guiding early human movement. These areas offered reliable access to water plant life and animal activity, making them essential pathways across the landscape. As you approach the lower ground, the sound becomes clearer. A steady flow, not loud, but persistent enough to anchor the space around it. You reach the edge of a shallow valley. Below, a narrow river winds its way through the land, its surface reflecting the early light in soft, shifting patterns. The banks are lined with thicker vegetation and the ground appears darker, richer with moisture. The group spreads out slightly as they descend, each person choosing a path that feels natural. You follow the slope carefully, feeling the ground change beneath your feet. It becomes softer, more uneven, requiring a bit more attention with each step. At the bottom, the air feels cooler, fresher. You kneel near the water, placing your hand into the flow. Cold, clear. You lift your hand and watch as droplets fall back into the river, creating small ripples that fade quickly. A subtle observation often noted by researchers is that early humans may have used rivers not only as sources of water, but also as navigational guides. Following a river could lead to new areas, new resources, and safer routes through unfamiliar terrain. You glance along the water's path. It curves gently, disappearing into the distance. You can imagine how it might guide movement over long stretches of land. Nearby others drink quietly, cupping water in their hands. Some gather near the edge, observing the surface. You notice how carefully they move, aware of the shifting ground beneath them. A few individuals begin to move along the riverbank, scanning the area. There is always observation, always awareness. Some scholars suggest that environments like this would have supported a wider variety of resources, from edible plants to small animals, making them valuable locations for temporary settlement. Others point out that such areas could also attract predators, requiring continued vigilance. You feel that balance here. Opportunity and risk. The group remains for a while, though time is difficult to measure. The light continues to grow, the sky shifting from grey into soft tones of gold and pale blue. You stand and begin to walk along the edge of the water, following the natural curve. The ground here is marked by subtle patterns, impressions in the soil, some fresh, some older, tracks. You crouch slightly, examining them, different shapes, different sizes, some narrow and pointed, others wider, heavier. A small but fascinating detail often discussed in tracking studies is that experienced observers can read these marks as a form of information, understanding not just what passed through, but when and how. You look closer, trying to see what they might see, the direction, the depth, the spacing. It begins to make sense though, only faintly. The group continues to move along the river, not in a straight line, but following its natural bends. The water becomes a quiet guide, shaping the path without needing to be followed exactly. You feel the rhythm again, walking, observing, adjusting. The valley opens slightly as you move, the banks widening and the vegetation becoming more varied. The light now fills the space fully, the warmth of the day beginning to return. You might think about how even today human settlements often form near water. Cities, towns, villages. The connection remains, though it has taken different forms. Here it is simpler, more direct. Water means life. The group slows once more near a bend in the river, where the ground rises slightly, creating a small natural vantage point. Some gather there, looking out across the water and the surrounding land. You join them. From this position you can see further, the river stretching ahead, the land beyond it, the patterns of movement that shape everything here. A broader perspective within human history suggests that landscapes like this have always played a role in shaping human behavior. The features of the land guide decisions, influence movement, and create opportunities. You feel that now, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. The group remains for a moment, then begins to move again, following the gentle curve of the river as it leads onward. You take one more glance at the water, then step forward, continuing along the path it quietly reveals. You continue along the curve of the river, your steps falling into a steady rhythm that now feels deeply familiar. The water moves beside you with a soft, continuous sound, never loud, never silent, always present. It becomes a kind of quiet companion, guiding without directing. The sun rises higher, and the warmth of the day begins to settle fully across the valley. The coolness from earlier fades, replaced by a gentle heat that rests lightly on your skin. The air carries more scent now, damp soil, growing plants, and the faint mineral trace of the river itself. The group spreads out along the bank, each person adjusting their position naturally. Some walk closer to the water, others remain slightly higher on the slope. There is no single formation, only a shared movement shaped by the land. An established understanding in studies of early human life suggests that daily routines during this period were closely tied to environmental conditions. There were no fixed schedules, no repeated clock-based patterns. Instead, activity flowed in response to light temperature and the availability of resources. You begin to feel that rhythm more clearly now. There is no sense of rushing toward a task, no urgency to complete something before a certain time. Instead, each moment unfolds into the next. Walking becomes observing. Observing becomes gathering. Gathering becomes resting. All connected. You slow slightly as the group approaches a wider section of the river. The water here moves more gently, spreading across a broader surface. The banks are lower, making access easier. Several individuals step closer to the edge. You follow. The ground beneath your feet feels softer, slightly damp. You adjust your balance instinctively, placing each step with a bit more care. Nearby, someone kneels and begins to wash their hands in the water, rubbing them together slowly before lifting them out again. The motion is calm, repetitive, almost soothing to watch. Another person dips a container into the river, lifting it carefully to avoid spilling. You notice how the group pauses here, not fully stopping, but settling into a slower pace. A smaller observation often noted by researchers is that access to water allowed for brief moments of rest and maintenance throughout the day. Washing, drinking, and simply pausing near a stable resource could create natural breaks in movement. You crouch near the edge, placing your hand into the water again. The cold is sharper now compared to the warmth of the air. It creates a contrast that feels refreshing. You let your fingers remain there for a moment, feeling the flow move around them. The current is gentle but constant, reminding you that even stillness here contains movement. As you lift your hand, droplets fall back into the river, each one creating small ripples that spread outward before fading. You watch them for a moment, then stand again. The group begins to move once more, though more slowly than before. Some linger near the water a bit longer, finishing small tasks before rejoining the others. A number of researchers suggest that early human life may have followed a pattern of alternating activity and rest rather than long continuous periods of work. Short pauses like this one would allow for recovery and reflection, even if they were not consciously planned. You begin to understand that pattern. It is not rigid, not defined, but present. The group continues along the riverbank, the terrain gradually shifting again. The ground rises slightly, becoming firmer and less damp. The vegetation thins, opening the space once more. The sound of the water remains, but it grows softer as you move a bit further from its edge. You glance back briefly. The river continues on unchanged, its path steady and uninterrupted. Then you turn forward again. The movement resumes, step by step. The warmth of the day increases, though still within a comfortable range. The air feels steady, carrying only a faint breeze that moves across the open space. You notice how your own body responds. Breathing steady, steps even, awareness balanced between near and far. The group maintains its quiet coordination, each person adjusting naturally to the shifting terrain. There is no visible effort to stay together, and yet no one drifts too far apart. It feels like a shared understanding. You begin to recognize the pattern more clearly now. Morning movement, midday slowing, short pauses near resources, then movement again, a cycle that repeats not exactly the same each day, but similar enough to create a sense of continuity. A broader interpretation in anthropological research suggests that such rhythms may have shaped not only physical behavior, but also mental patterns, creating a sense of flow that guided daily life without the need for structured planning. You feel that flow now. It carries you forward without resistance, without effort. The group reaches as another slight rise in the land, and as you step up onto it, the view opens once more. The river curves away, partially hidden by distance, while the open plains stretch outward beyond. You pause for a moment, taking in the scene, the light, the space, the quiet movement of everything around you. Then without hesitation, you step forward again. The rhythm continues, calm, steady, unbroken. And as you walk with the group into the unfolding day, you begin to sense that this pattern, this quiet repetition of movement and rest, is not just a routine. It is a way of being, one that has carried humans forward for countless generations. You take a slow breath and continue. You move forward with the group as the day continues to unfold, the warmth now settled across the land in a steady and familiar way. The river has drifted slightly out of reach, its sound now softer, almost blending into the background. The ground beneath your feet feels firm again, dry and stable. The rhythm carries on, step by step, breath by breath. And yet there is a quiet sense that something will shift again. It begins slowly. The light softens just slightly, almost unnoticeable unless you are paying attention. The angle of the sun lowers and the shadows begin to stretch longer across the ground. The air changes too, losing a bit of its midday warmth, replaced by something cooler, more balanced. The group responds without needing to signal it. The pace adjusts, not stopping, not rushing, just easing into a new phase of the day. A well-supported perspective in anthropology suggests that fire was not only a practical tool, but a central element of daily life for early humans. It marked transitions from activity to rest, from daylight to darkness, from movement to gathering. You begin to sense that transition approaching again. The group shifts direction, slightly moving toward a patch of land that offers a subtle sense of shelter. Not enclosed, but protected just enough by a rise in the terrain and a scattering of low vegetation. You follow your steps, slowing as the others begin to gather. The space feels familiar in its purpose, even if the exact location is new. A place to pause, a place to return inward. You notice how some individuals begin to collect small pieces of wood from the ground. Dry branches, broken fragments, anything that will burn easily. The movement is unhurried but purposeful. Others clear a small area, moving stones aside, creating a space where the ground is bare. Preparation. Quiet. Steady. An interesting detail often discussed by researchers is that maintaining fire required ongoing attention. It was not simply created and left alone. It needed to be fed, protected, and managed carefully, especially in changing environmental conditions. You watch as one person kneels and begins to arrange the gathered wood in a small, deliberate structure. The pieces are placed with care, forming a shape that allows air to move through. Another brings a glowing ember, preserved from an earlier fire, carried carefully in a piece of material. The ember is placed gently among the wood. For a moment, nothing happens. Then slowly a thin thread of smoke rises. A faint glow strengthens. The fire begins again. You feel the warmth before the flame fully forms. It spreads outward in a soft wave, touching your skin lightly. The air around the fire shifts, becoming warmer, more contained. You sit down nearby, joining the others as they gather once more. The circle forms naturally, loose, open, and yet connected. A subtle idea sometimes explored in research is that fire may have created a sense of shared space where individuals came together not only for warmth and safety, but for connection. The light draws attention inward, focusing awareness on those nearby. You feel that now? The open landscape fades slightly from your awareness. The space around the fire becomes central. Someone adds another piece of wood, adjusting the structure as the flame grows. The crackling sound returns soft and steady, blending with the gentle movement of evening air. You notice how the group settles, shoulders lower, movement slow, breathing deepens. The constant motion of the day gives way to stillness. A smaller observation noted by some researchers is that the act of maintaining fire may have created a shared responsibility within the group, not assigned, not spoken, but understood. Each person contributing in small ways to sustain the warmth and light. You see that in the subtle movements. One person adjusts the wood, another shifts closer, then later moves away. A third watches quietly, ready to act if needed. The fire continues to burn steady and calm. The light it casts flickers across faces and hands, creating soft patterns that shift with each movement of flame. The surrounding darkness begins to gather at the edges, not yet fully present, but approaching. You glance outward briefly. The land remains open, quiet, unchanged. Then your attention returns to the fire. It draws you in again. The warmth feels deeper now, contrasting more clearly with the cooling air. You adjust your position slightly, turning your body to face it more directly. You might think about how even in modern life, gathering around a shared source of light or warmth still carries meaning. A quiet room, a soft glow, a sense of closeness. The details have changed, but the feeling remains. Here that feeling is simple, direct, unfiltered. The fire becomes the center of everything. Light, warmth, focus. As the evening continues, the group remains gathered, the rhythm of the day settling into its final phase. There is no rush to move again, no urgency to begin something new, only presence. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth, the calm, the steady connection to those around you. And as the light of the fire grows stronger against the fading sky, you begin to sense that this moment, like so many others, is part of a pattern that repeats again and again, day into night. Movement into rest, fire into darkness, then back again. You let yourself settle into that pattern, without resistance, without question, simply part of it. You sit close to the fire as evening deepens, the glow steady and warm against the cooling air. The light flickers softly across the ground, catching on small stones, hands, and the edges of gathered objects. Beyond the circle, darkness settles in layers, quiet and patient. For a while, nothing changes. Then slowly, you begin to notice something new. A sound, faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the natural rhythm of the fire. A soft tapping. You turn your head slightly, listening more closely. One individual sits just beyond the brightest part of the firelight, holding a small piece of wood. Their fingers move in a steady pattern, tapping gently against it. The sound is light, almost like a pulse. Tap, pause, tap, pause. It repeats, not perfectly, but with intention. Another person nearby shifts slightly, their hand moving against the ground in a similar rhythm. Not exactly the same, but close enough to feel connected. You listen. The pattern grows. A subtle observation from anthropological research suggests that rhythmic behavior may have played a role in early human social interaction. Repeated sounds or movements could create a shared experience, strengthening group cohesion even without structured language. You feel that happening now? The tapping continues and others begin to respond in small ways. A soft sound added here, a gentle movement there. It is not coordinated in a strict sense, but it aligns naturally. The fire crackles in between. The wind moves softly beyond. All of it blends together. You might find yourself wondering if this is the beginning of something. Not music as you know it, but something related. A shared rhythm. A pattern that exists beyond immediate survival. A detail sometimes discussed by researchers is that simple instruments such as hollow bones or shaped wood may have been used in later periods to create sound. While evidence from this exact time is limited, the human capacity for rhythm likely existed much earlier. You glance again at the individual tapping the wood. Their focus is calm, their movement steady. It does not feel like a performance. It feels like a natural extension of being present. Nearby, another person produces a low vocal tone, soft and sustained. It blends with the rhythm, adding a new layer. The sound rises slightly, then falls, repeating in a gentle cycle. You feel it in your chest more than you hear it. The group does not react with surprise. There is no sudden attention drawn to it. Instead, it becomes part of the atmosphere. You begin to notice how your own breathing starts to align with the rhythm. Slow, even, calm. A perspective explored in some studies suggests that shared rhythmic activity may have helped regulate emotion and reinforce social bonds. Moving or sounding together can create a sense of connection that does not rely on words. You feel that connection now, subtle, quiet, but real. The firelight continues to flicker, casting shifting patterns that seem to move in time with the sounds. Shadows stretch and contract, creating a visual rhythm that mirrors the auditory one. You watch the interplay for a moment. Light, sound, movement, all flowing together. A smaller but intriguing idea proposed by some researchers is that early forms of music or rhythm may have emerged not as entertainment but as a byproduct of social interaction, a natural extension of being together rather than a separate activity. That feels true here. No one has started something new. It has simply formed, gradually, without intention. You shift your position slightly, feeling the warmth of the fire more directly. The ground beneath you holds a gentle heat, now making it easier to remain still. The sounds continue. Tap, pause, soft tone, pause, tap again. There is no clear beginning, no clear end, just a continuous flow. You glance around the group. Some remain still, eyes half closed, listening. Others move subtly, adding small contributions to the pattern. No one leads, no one follows, and yet everything aligns. You might reflect on how even today music often brings people together, creating shared moments that feel larger than the sum of their parts. Here that feeling exists in its simplest form. Unstructured, unplanned, and deeply human. The night deepens further, the stars bright above the air, cooling gently as the fire continues to burn. The rhythm does not grow louder or more complex. It remains soft, almost like a background presence, a gentle thread woven through the moment. You feel your thoughts slow again. The steady pattern draws your attention inward, calming the mind without effort. There is nothing to analyze, nothing to solve, only to experience. The tapping continues for a while, then gradually fades, not stopping abruptly but becoming less frequent. The vocal tones soften, then disappear into the quiet. The fire remains, the night remains, and the space returns to stillness. But something lingers, a sense of connection, a memory of shared rhythm. You take a slow breath, feeling the calm settle more deeply into your body. And as you sit there, surrounded by the soft glow and quiet presence of others, you begin to understand something gentle. Not all important moments are loud. Some exist in patterns, in repetition. In the simple act of being together, you let that thought drift lightly through your mind, then release it. Returning to the quiet, you remain by the fire as the rhythm fades, the night settling once more into a calm and steady quiet. The warmth continues to reach you in soft waves while the air beyond the circle grows cooler with each passing moment. The stars above seem sharper now, more defined against the deep sky. For a while, nothing new begins, and yet something continues. You notice it in the small interactions around you, not in large movements, not in obvious gestures, but in quiet exchanges. One person shifts slightly and reaches toward another, offering a small piece of food. The motion is simple, almost automatic. The other accepts it without hesitation, their response just as quiet. There is no announcement, no pause to acknowledge the act, and yet it carries meaning. A commonly accepted idea in human evolution studies is that the sharing of food played a significant role in strengthening social bonds within early human groups. It allowed individuals to support one another, especially during times when resources were uncertain. You see that reflected here, not as a formal rule, but as a natural behaviour. Nearby, an older individual sits with a younger one, their movements slow and measured. The older person holds a small object, turning it in their hands before passing it over. The younger watches closely, then takes it, examining it with careful attention. No explanations, no instruction spoken, and yet something is being passed along. A smaller observation noted by researchers is that knowledge transfer in early human groups likely relied heavily on demonstration and shared experience. Skills were not taught through long descriptions, but through repeated exposure and quiet guidance. You begin to understand how that works. The younger individual studies the object, then attempts to mimic the motion they just observed. It is not exact, but it carries intention. The older one watches, then nods slightly. That is enough. You might think about how learning today often feels separated from life placed into specific moments or environments. But here it flows, continuously woven into daily actions without distinction. The fire crackles softly. A small spark rises, then disappears into the darkness. The group remains gathered, though the energy is quieter now. The earlier rhythm has faded into stillness, replaced by a deeper sense of rest. A perspective sometimes discussed in anthropology is that early human groups may have relied on strong social cohesion to survive. Cooperation, sharing, and the passing of knowledge would have been essential in environments where resources could not be guaranteed. Others note that while cooperation was important, group dynamics were likely complex, shaped by individual relationships and changing conditions. As you sit there, you sense the balance, connection, and individuality. Each person present, each one part of the whole. You notice how often people glance at one another, briefly, without lingering, just enough to remain aware, a subtle network of attention. The firelight continues to shift, casting soft patterns across faces and hands. The movement of light feels almost like a continuation of the earlier rhythm, though quieter now. You feel your own body relax further, your shoulders lower, your breathing slows. The warmth of the fire contrasts gently with the coolness of the night, creating a balance that feels easy to settle into. You glance outward again. The darkness remains open, deep. The memory of distant movement from earlier lingers faintly, but it does not return. The night holds steady. A thoughtful idea proposed by some researchers is that early human groups may have developed a sense of trust through repeated shared experiences. Moving together, gathering together, resting together. Over time, these patterns could create a stable social structure, even without formal systems. You begin to feel that trust, not as something spoken, but as something present, in the way people sit close yet not too close, in the way objects are shared without hesitation, in the way attention moves gently between individuals. You shift slightly, adjusting your position on the ground. The surface feels warm where the fire has reached it, cooler where it has not. You find a comfortable balance settling once more. The group grows quieter. Some lie down, others remain seated for a while longer. The transition into rest happens gradually, without a clear beginning, without a clear end. You might reflect on how even now human connection often rests in small moments rather than large gestures. A shared space, a quiet exchange, a simple act of giving. Here those moments feel more visible, more essential. The fire continues to burn, though its intensity softens as the wood settles into glowing embers. The light becomes lower, warmer, more subdued. You feel your awareness begin to drift again, not abruptly, just a gentle fading. The sounds of the night blend into a steady background. The presence of others remains close, though less defined as your focus softens. And as you lie back once more, the ground steady beneath you, the sky open above you, carry with you the quiet sense of connections that has formed, not through word, not through explanation, but through shared experience. You close your eyes slowly, letting that feeling remain. As the night carries you gently back into rest, you wake again to a quiet that feels softer than before, as if the night itself is beginning to loosen its hold on the world. The sky above is no longer fully dark. A pale hint of light stretches faintly along the horizon, signalling the slow return of morning. The air is cool, fresh in a way that feels almost new. You take a slow breath and sit up, your body adjusting to the ground beneath you. The warmth from the fire has faded, leaving only a faint memory in the soil. The embers are nearly gone now, their glow reduced to a dim and fading presence. Around you, the group begins to stir. The pattern is familiar. Subtle movements, quiet shifts, a gradual return to awareness. You rise to your feet and look out across the land. In the growing light, everything appears unchanged. The same open space, the same scattered vegetation, the same distant horizon stretching endlessly outward. And yet something feels different, not in what you see, but in what you understand. A widely held interpretation in archaeology is that much of early human life left very little permanent trace. Without built structures or durable materials, entire periods of time can appear almost invisible in the archaeological record. You begin to feel the meaning of that now. You look back at the place where the group rested. There is almost nothing to mark it. No clear sign of the fire beyond a faint discoloration in the soil. No defined boundary. No lasting impression. Just open ground, as if the night never happened. A smaller but striking observation often made by researchers is that even repeated use of a location might leave only minimal evidence, especially over long stretches of time. Wind, rain, and natural processes can erase signs, quickly returning the land to its original state. You take a few steps scanning the ground. There are faint marks, subtle depressions, traces that suggest movement, but they are already fading. You realize how easily this moment could be lost. How an entire group, an entire night, an entire sequence of events could disappear without leaving a clear record. You might think about how much of human history depends on what survives, what is preserved, what is discovered, and how much remains unknown simply because it left no lasting mark. The group begins to move again, gathering their few belongings without ceremony. There is no effort to preserve the space, no attempt to maintain it for return. Life continues forward. Always. You follow as they step away from the resting place. Within moments, it becomes just another part of the landscape, indistinguishable from everything around it. Some researchers suggest that this lack of permanent impact may have been a defining feature of early human life, moving lightly across the land, leaving little behind, adapting continuously rather than reshaping the environment. Others point out that this also makes it difficult to fully understand this period, as so much evidence has simply not survived. As you walk, you begin to feel a quiet sense of distance, not physical, but temporal. You are here, experiencing this moment, and yet you know that it will not remain. It will not be recorded, not in the way later history will be. The land opens again as you move forward, the light growing stronger with each step. The sky shifts into soft tones of gold and pale blue, the sun beginning its slow rise. The group spreads out slightly, returning to that familiar pattern of movement. Walking, observing, adjusting. You glance once more behind you. The resting place is already gone from view. Not hidden, just absorbed back into the landscape. A thoughtful idea sometimes explored in research is that this kind of impermanence may have shaped how early humans understood the world. Without lasting structures, without fixed locations, experience itself may have been more immediate, more present. You consider that, the idea that each moment exists fully, then fades. Not lost, but not held. You feel the ground beneath your feet again steady and real. The air warms slightly as the sun rises. The sounds of the day begin to return. Birds calling, wind shifting, the quiet presence of life continuing. You might reflect on how even now so much of what we experience is temporary. Moments pass, days fade, and yet they still shape who we are. Here that truth feels clearer, more visible. The group continues forward, the rhythm unchanged. No pause, no hesitation, just movement. You follow your steps in Mehdi, and as you walk across the open land, leaving behind a place that has already disappeared into memory, you begin to understand something subtle but profound. This era is not hidden because it did not exist. It is hidden because it left so little behind. The people, the moments, the lives lived here, all real, all present, and yet almost invisible to the future. You take a slow breath, feeling the quiet weight of that thought, then let it settle. As the journey continues, you continue forward with the group as the morning fully opens around you, the light now clear and steady across the landscape. The air carries a gentle warmth again, though still touched by the coolness that lingers from the early hours. Your steps feel natural now, almost effortless, as if your body has settled into the rhythm of this world. The land stretches wide ahead, open, unbroken, and yet something within you feels different, not in what you see, but in how you're thinking. You begin to notice it slowly, a shift in awareness, a quiet sense of reflection that seems to move beyond the immediate moment. You glance at the group. They continue as before, walking, observing, adjusting. Their attention remains grounded in the present, shaped by the land and the needs of the day. And yet you cannot help but wonder what is happening inside their minds. A broadly accepted idea in studies of human evolution is that around this general period something began to change in the way humans thought. Not suddenly, not all at once, but gradually. The capacity for more complex ideas, for imagination, for abstract thinking, may have been developing beneath the surface. You feel the edge of that question now, the possibility that this moment exists at the boundary between different ways of thinking. You watch as one individual pauses, briefly looking out across the land. Their gaze holds for a moment longer than necessary, as if observing something beyond immediate need. Then they move on. Was that simply awareness, or something more? A smaller but intriguing idea explored by some researchers is that early humans may have experienced moments of deeper reflection, even if those moments were not constant or structured. A brief pause, a longer look, a quiet sense of something beyond the present. You consider that, the idea that thought itself may have been changing, not in visible ways, but in subtle shifts. You continue walking, your attention moving between the group and your own thoughts. The ground beneath you remains steady, the patterns of the land familiar now. Small rises and dips, variations in colour and texture. You notice them without needing to focus. Your awareness has expanded. You are still present, but you are also reflecting. A number of scholars suggest that what is sometimes called the cognitive awakening or cognitive shift may have occurred gradually over tens of thousands of years. Some propose that by 80,000 years ago the foundations were already in place, even if the full expression came later. Others remain cautious, pointing out that evidence for such changes is complex and often indirect. You let those ideas settle without trying to resolve them. Instead, you observe. A child nearby pauses and looks at their own hands, turning them slowly as if noticing them in a new way. The moment is brief, almost easy to miss. Then they move on. You wonder if that moment holds meaning, or if it is simply part of the flow of awareness. The group continues forward, maintaining its quiet coordination. The rhythm of movement remains unchanged, even as your perception of it deepens. You begin to notice patterns within patterns, not just the physical movement, but the repetition of actions, the way certain behaviors return, gathering, walking, resting, watching, all part of a cycle that continues without interruption. You might reflect on how in modern life patterns are often structured and defined, schedules, routines, systems, but here the pattern exists without being named. It is felt, lived. A subtle observation sometimes raised in research is that the ability to recognize patterns may have been a key part of human cognitive development, seeing connections, anticipating outcomes, understanding repetition. These skills could support both survival and deeper thinking. You feel that recognition now. The sense that what you're experiencing is not random. It is part of something larger, even if that larger pattern is not fully understood. The sun rises higher and the warmth increases slightly. The air feels steady, carrying the faint movement of breeze across the open land. You notice how your body responds naturally, adjusting, balancing, continuing. The group moves toward another open stretch, the land flattening again into wide space. The horizon feels distant, almost unreachable, yet always present. You glance across it, and for a moment you imagine, not clearly, not in detailed imagery, but in a faint sense of possibility. A future, a continuation, something beyond what is here now. You pause, then continue walking. A perspective often discussed in human evolution suggests that imagination may have been one of the defining features that set humans apart. The ability to think beyond the immediate, to consider what is not present, to hold ideas that are not directly tied to survival. You feel the edge of that now, not fully formed, but present, a quiet expansion of thought. The group continues without interruption, their movement steady and grounded. They remain within the present moment, responding to the land, to the environment, to the needs of the day. You move with them, but something within you has shifted. You are not just observing the world, you are beginning to think about it in a different way. You take a slow breath, feeling the air fill your lungs. The warmth of the day, the steady rhythm of steps, the quiet presence of others, and as you continue forward, you begin to understand something subtle but powerful. This era is not just about survival. It is about transformation, a slow, almost invisible change in the way humans experience the world. You let that thought settle gently, then release it, returning once more to the rhythm of movement, step by step, as the journey continues. You continue walking as the day settles into a steady, familiar rhythm. The warmth remains balanced, not overwhelming, and the air carries a gentle movement that keeps everything from feeling still. The land stretches wide again, open and quiet, with only subtle changes guiding your path. The group maintains its spacing, not too close, not too far, a pattern you now recognize without needing to think about it. And yet as you move, a different feeling begins to surface, not in the environment, but within the experience itself, a sense of distance. You notice how the space between individuals feels both wide and small at the same time. There is physical distance, yes, but also a quiet connection that seems to bridge it effortlessly. You walk a few steps slightly apart from the others, not separated, just aware of the space around you. The land feels larger here, more expansive. The horizon stretches in every direction uninterrupted, giving you a sense of how small the group is within it. A widely accepted idea in anthropology is that early human groups were often isolated from one another for long periods. Distances between groups could be vast, and encounters like the one you sensed earlier may have been infrequent. You begin to feel that isolation, not as something negative, but as something real. The group is small, the world is large, and beyond what you can see there may be nothing, or everything. A smaller but thoughtful observation sometimes discussed by researchers is that living in small groups may have created strong internal bonds, while also shaping a sense of separation from others outside the group. Familiar and unfamiliar, known and unknown. You glance back at the people around you. Their movements feel familiar now, predictable in the best way, comforting, and yet beyond them the world remains open and uncertain. You might reflect on how even today people often experience both connection and isolation at the same time, surrounded by others yet aware of distance, close yet separate. Here that balance feels more visible, more grounded. The group continues forward, the rhythm unchanged. You notice how often individuals look outward, scanning the horizon, observing the land. Awareness extends beyond the group even as connection remains within it. Some researchers suggest that this dual awareness may have been essential for survival, maintaining strong group cohesion while remaining alert to the wider environment. Others note that the psychological experience of such a balance is difficult to reconstruct from evidence alone. As you walk, you begin to feel both sides of it, the quiet presence of others nearby, and the vast openness beyond. You take a slow breath, letting the air fill your lungs. It feels expansive, unrestricted. The ground beneath your feet remains steady, the pattern of movement continuing without interruption. Small changes in terrain guide your steps, but nothing disrupts the flow. A child moves slightly ahead, then pauses, looking back briefly before continuing. The motion is simple, but it carries meaning. Stay close, but explore. Another individual lingers behind for a moment, scanning the ground, then returns to the group. The pattern holds. Connection. Distance. Connection again. A broader perspective within human studies suggests that this balance between independence and group cohesion may have shaped human social behavior in lasting ways. The ability to move freely while maintaining bonds could support both exploration and survival. You feel that balance now, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. The sun continues its slow path across the sky, the light steady and warm. The air carries a faint breeze moving across the land in gentle waves. You notice how your awareness shifts between near and far, the steps of those around you, the distant line of the horizon, the small details of the ground, the wider shape of the landscape, all part of the same experience. You might think about how in modern life attention is often pulled in many directions at once. Here it flows more naturally, moving between layers without strain. The group continues their movement unbroken. No one speaks, and yet nothing feels empty. A subtle idea sometimes explored in research is that silence itself may have been an important part of early human interaction. Not the absence of communication, but a different form of it. Presence without constant sound. You feel that now. The quiet is not empty, it is full. Full of awareness, full of connection, full of possibility. You take another step, then another. The rhythm continues, and as you move through the open land, feeling both the closeness of the group and the vastness of the world around you, you begin to understand something simple but profound. Humans have always existed between these two states, together and alone, connected and separate. You let that understanding settle gently within you, not needing to hold on to it, just allowing it to be part of the experience. As you continue forward with the group, you continue walking with the group as the light begins to soften once again. The sun lowers gradually, its warmth easing into something gentler, something that feels less direct. The land stretches ahead in familiar patterns, yet there is a subtle sense that something is shifting, not in a sudden way, but quietly, almost beneath the surface. The group moves steadily, their rhythm unchanged. And yet as you look more closely, you begin to notice small differences, moments that feel slightly new. A person pauses longer than expected, holding their gaze on a distant point. Another adjusts their path in a way that seems less reactive and more anticipatory, as if guided by something beyond immediate observation. You follow their movement curious. The land ahead rises gently, forming a low ridge. As you reach it, the view opens again, revealing a wide stretch of terrain that feels both familiar and different at the same time. There are patterns here, but they seem more complex, more layered. A widely discussed perspective in human evolution suggests that over long periods of time, small changes in behavior and thought began to accumulate. These changes did not appear all at once. Instead, they built, gradually shaping the path toward what we would later recognize as more advanced human societies. You begin to sense the edge of that transition, not clearly, but faintly. A small but thought-provoking observation, sometimes raised by researchers, is that innovation may not always appear as something obvious. It can exist in subtle shifts, slight improvements, new ways of doing familiar things. You notice that now. One individual uses a tool in a slightly different way, adjusting their grip to create a more precise motion. Another arranges gathered materials more carefully, as if anticipating their use later. These are small changes, easy to overlook, and yet they feel important. You walk a little closer, observing without interrupting. The movements remain calm, unhurried, but there is a quiet intention behind them, a sense of looking ahead. Some researchers propose that this kind of forward thinking may have been emerging during this period, allowing humans to plan beyond the immediate moment. Others suggest that while such behavior existed, it may have been limited or situational rather than consistent. As you move with the group, you begin to feel that possibility. The idea that the future is starting to take shape, even if only in small ways. The sun continues to lower, casting longer shadows across the land. The light softens into warmer tones, creating a sense of transition as the day moves toward evening. You notice how the group begins to adjust once again. The spacing tightens slightly. The pace slows, not stopping, but preparing. There is a familiarity to this, a return to the pattern you've already experienced. And yet it feels slightly different this time. More defined, more intentional. You follow as they move toward a gently sheltered area where the ground rises just enough to provide a sense of boundary. The space feels suitable for rest, though nothing marks it as such. Still, the choice feels deliberate. You might reflect on how even now humans seek out places that feel right. not always for obvious reasons, but through a sense of comfort, of suitability, of subtle recognition. Here that instinct feels more direct, less filtered. The group begins to gather, movement slow. Some individuals collect small materials, others clear space. The process is familiar, and yet there is a smoothness to it that feels refined. A broader interpretation within anthropological research suggests that over time, repeated behaviors can become more efficient, more consistent. What begins as trial and adjustment may gradually settle into reliable patterns. You see that here. The actions flow more easily, less hesitation, more certainty. The fire is prepared once again, though, with small variations in how the materials are arranged. The structure seems slightly more stable, allowing the flame to catch more quickly. You watch as the ember is placed, the smoke rises, the fire begins. Faster this time. You feel the warmth spread outward, the familiar glow returning as the evening settles in. The group gathers around it, the circle forming once more. And yet something feels different, not dramatically, just subtly. A sense that the process has become more refined, more practiced, more understood. A thoughtful idea sometimes explored by researchers is that the accumulation of small improvements over time may have played a significant role in human development. Not one major breakthrough, but many small ones, each building on the last. You feel that accumulation now, in the way the group moves, in the way they prepare, in the quiet confidence of their actions. You sit down near the fire, feeling the warmth against the cooling air. The light flickers across the ground, creating soft patterns that shift with each movement of flame. The night begins to gather once more. The stars appear slowly. The sounds of the day fade. And as you sit there surrounded by the familiar rhythm of firelight and quiet presence, you begin to understand something important. Change does not always announce itself. It does not always arrive in clear, visible forms. Sometimes it exists in small moments, in slight adjustments, in quiet shifts that over time shape everything. You take a slow breath, letting that understanding settle as the fire burns steadily beside you, and the journey continues. You sit near the fire as night settles once more, the familiar glow spreading softly across the ground. The warmth reaches you in gentle waves while the darkness beyond the circle deepens quiet and steady. The stars appear again, scattered across the sky in patterns that feel both distant and constant. For a while everything feels known, the rhythm of the day, the cycle of movement and rest, the patterns of gathering, watching and returning. And yet as you sit there, a different kind of thought begins to form, not about what you see, but about what cannot be fully seen. You glance around the group. Their movements are calm practice, grounded in the present. Each action follows naturally from the last, shaped by experience and necessity. And still there are questions that reach beyond the moment. A commonly held view in modern research is that this period of human history remains one of the least understood. Evidence exists, but it is scattered, fragmented, often incomplete. What we know comes from small traces, stone tools, remains, subtle signs left behind, but so much is missing. You begin to feel that absence, not as something empty, but as something vast, a quiet space where answers might exist but cannot be fully reached. One individual near the fire shifts slightly, adding a piece of wood to the flame. The fire responds, brightening for a moment before settling again. The light flickers across their hands, revealing the steady familiarity of the motion. You watch it closely. Such a simple act. And yet how much of its meaning will remain? A lesser discussed point among researchers is how much of human behavior leaves no trace at all. Gestures, sounds, thoughts, entire experiences that exist fully in their moment then disappear without record. You begin to understand that more deeply now. Everything you have seen, the quiet communication, the shared rhythm, the subtle expressions of awareness, almost none of it will remain. The fire crackles softly, its sound blending with the distant night. The air feels cooler now, brushing gently against your skin. You adjust your position slightly, leaning closer to the warmth. You might think about how modern understanding relies on evidence, what can be measured, what can be preserved. But here, so much of life exists beyond those boundaries. Some researchers suggest that our picture of early humans may be incomplete, not because they lacked complexity, but because the kinds of complexity they had do not leave lasting marks. Others argue that while this may be true, caution is needed when interpreting what cannot be directly observed. You sit with that uncertainty, not trying to resolve it, just allowing it to be present. Nearby, a person traces a small pattern in the soil, again similar to what you noticed before. The motion is quiet, repetitive, almost meditative. Another glances at it briefly, then looks away. Meaning exists, but it is not explained. A subtle idea sometimes explored in research is that the development of symbolic behavior may not have been a sudden shift, but a gradual layering of small actions that only later became more visible in the archaeological record. You consider that. The possibility that what you are witnessing now is part of something that will only become clear much later. The fire continues to burn. The group remains gathered. The night holds steady, and within it questions remain. You look upward again. The stars feel unchanged, reliable, a contrast to the uncertainty below. You might wonder how much of what you are experiencing will ever be understood. How many moments like this have existed, unrecorded, unexamined, simply lived and then gone? The thought does not feel heavy, just quiet, a reminder of the limits of knowing. A number of scholars emphasize that understanding early human history requires interpretation, not just observation. Clues must be connected patterns, inferred possibilities considered. But certainty is rare. You feel that now. The sense that what you are part of is both real and elusive at the same time. You shift slightly, feeling the warmth of the fire against the coolness of the night. The contrast grounds you again, bringing your awareness back to the present moment. The group around you remains calm, connected, unspoken. The questions do not disturb that. They exist alongside it. You take a slow breath, letting the air settle within you. The fire flickers, the stars remain, the night continues. And as you sit there between what is known and what is not, you begin to understand something gentle. Not everything needs to be explained. Some parts of human history exist as quiet spaces, places where certainty fades and possibility remains. You let that understanding settle softly, then release it, returning once more to the warmth of the fire and the steady calm of the night. You sit quietly as the fire continues to burn its light steady against the deepening night. The warmth reaches you in gentle pulses while the air beyond the circle remains cool and still. The stars above feel endless, stretching far beyond what you can follow. For a while your thoughts remain calm, settled, then slowly something begins to shift again. Not in the world around you, but in how you relate to it. You look at the group. Their movements are familiar now, the way they sit, the way they adjust their posture, the way they share space without needing to speak. You've seen these patterns repeat over and over in quiet consistency, and yet as you observe them now, something feels closer, more connected. A commonly accepted perspective in human studies suggests that many of the behaviors we see in early humans still exist in us today. The need for connection, the ability to adapt, the awareness of environment. These are not lost traits. They have simply taken new forms. You begin to feel that connection more clearly, not as an idea, but as something lived. You shift slightly, resting your hands against the ground. The texture feels familiar now. The firmness of the soil, the subtle warmth near the fire, the coolness just beyond it. These sensations are simple, and yet they are the same sensations you would feel in any time. You might think about how much has changed in the world since this era. Cities, technology systems that shape daily life in ways these people could never imagine. And yet beneath all of that, something remains the same. The experience of being present, the awarenesses of space, of warmth of others nearby. A smaller but meaningful observation, sometimes discussed in recent research, is that while human societies have become more complex, many core aspects of human behavior have remained remarkably consistent over time. The ways we respond to comfort, to connection, to shared experience. You feel that now, sitting near the fire, listening to the quiet, aware of those around you. The group begins to settle further into rest. Some lie down their bodies, relaxing fully against the ground. Others remain seated a bit longer, their gaze soft, their attention unfocused. The transition feels natural, unforced. You glance outward again. The darkness remains unchanged, stretching far beyond the reach of the firelight, but it no longer feels distant in the same way. It feels like part of the same world just beyond immediate perception. A thoughtful idea explored in human evolution research is that the continuity between past and present may be stronger than we often realize. While environments and tools have changed, the underlying structure of human experience may have remained deeply connected. You consider that, the possibility that in some ways you are not so different from those around you. The same awareness, the same quiet moments of thought, the same need for rest. You lie back slowly, allowing your body to settle into the ground once more. The surface feels familiar now, your body adjusting easily to its shape. The firelight flickers at the edge of your vision. The stars remain above. Your breathing slows. You might reflect on how even now, at the end of a long day, the process of settling into rest feels much the same. The body relaxes, the mind quiets, the world softens. Here that process is simpler, more direct, but not entirely different. Some researchers suggest that understanding early human life is not only about studying differences, but also recognizing similarities, the threads that connect us across time even when everything else seems distant. You feel those threads now. Subtle, but present. The group around you becomes less distinct as your awareness softens. Their movement slow, their presence remains, but it blends into the background of the night. The fire continues to burn though more quietly now. The light lowers, the warmth softens. You take a slow breath, letting it settle deeply within you. The air feels calm. The world feels steady. And as your thoughts begin to fade once more, you carry with you a quiet understanding that this distant era is not entirely separate from you. It is part of a longer story, one that continues, one that reaches into the present moment. You let that feeling remain, not holding onto it tightly, just allowing it to be there as your eyes close, and this night carries you gently into rest once more. You drift slowly through the last stretch of night, your awareness soft and unhurried, carried by the steady calm that has settled over everything. The fire has faded to a low glow now, its warmth gentler, almost distant. The air is cool but not uncomfortable, resting lightly against your skin. At some point, without a clear moment marking the change, your eyes open again. The sky is beginning to lighten. A pale grey spreads along the horizon, slowly pushing back the darkness. The stars fade one by one, not disappearing all at once, but slipping quietly out of view. You sit up, your movement slow, your body still heavy with rest. Around you, the group begins to stir again. The pattern you have come to know so well returns. Subtle shifts, quiet movements, the gradual return from sleep into waking. You rise to your feet and look out across the land. The light grows steadily, revealing the same open world you have walked through, rested in and observed. The grasses, the distant trees, the gentle curves of the ground. Everything feels both familiar and new at the same time. A commonly accepted understanding in human history is that this long period stretching across tens of thousands of years laid the foundation for everything that would come later. Movement, cooperation, adaptation and awareness all developed here, even if their full forms were not yet visible. You feel the weight of that now, not as something heavy, but as something steady, a quiet foundation beneath everything. The group begins to move once more, gathering their few belongings without hesitation. There is no pause to reflect on the previous day, no attempt to hold on to what has passed. Life continues forward. Always, you follow your steps steady, your awareness calm. The rhythm begins again, walking, observing, adjusting. The cycle repeats, not exactly the same, but close enough to feel continuous. A smaller but meaningful observation often noted by researchers is that much of early human life was shaped by repetition, not in a rigid way, but through patterns that provided stability in an unpredictable world. You feel that stability now, the familiarity of movement, the quiet coordination of the group, the balance between awareness and rest. The sun begins to rise, its light warming the air once more. The coolness of a night fades, replaced by the gentle heat of day. The land brightens, colours returning in soft natural tones. You walk with the group as they move across the open space, their figures steady against the growing light. You might reflect on everything you have experienced. The fire, the quiet communication, the gathering of food, the hunt, the moments of stillness beneath the stars. Each one part of a larger pattern, each one connected. A thoughtful perspective sometimes explored in human studies is that this era represents not a missing chapter, but a quiet one. A time when much was happening, even if little was preserved. You begin to understand that more fully now. Nothing here feels empty, nothing feels incomplete. It is simply subtle, difficult to see from a distance, but clear when experienced directly. The group continues forward, their movement unbroken, their rhythm steady. You follow for a while longer, then gradually something begins to change. Not in the world around you, but in your sense of presence. The land feels slightly more distant, the sounds soften, the details blur gently at the edges. You realize that the journey is coming to an end, not abruptly, but slowly, like the fading of night into day. You take one last look across the landscape. The wide open space, the quiet movement of the group, the steady light of the rising sun. Then you let it go, allowing the scene to fade softly from your awareness. And as it does, you carry with you a quiet understanding that this hidden era was never truly empty, never truly silent. It was full of life, full of meaning, even if much of it cannot be fully explained. Your breathing slows, your body relaxes more deeply. The world around you softens, and you begin to drift, not into this ancient land again, but into rest. A calm, steady rest that feels grounded and complete. The fire fades, the light settles, the journey closes gently. As the last traces of the ancient world fade, you find yourself resting in a quiet space where everything feels soft and still. The movement of time slows and the sense of distance disappears. You are no longer walking across open land, no longer watching the patterns of early human life unfold. Instead, you are simply here, calm, at ease. The warmth you once felt from the fire lingers faintly like a memory that has settled into something gentle. The cool air of the night has softened, blending into a comfortable balance that surrounds you without demanding attention. You might notice your breathing now, slow, even, unforced. There is nothing left to observe, nothing left to follow. The journey has come to rest, and yet a quiet feeling remains. A sense that what you experienced was part of something much larger. A long continuous story that stretches far beyond any single moment. The people you walked with, the land you crossed, the patterns you noticed, all part of a history that still lives within you in small, subtle ways. You do not need to hold on to those thoughts. You can let them drift, like the fading light at the edge of the horizon, like the last glow of embers settling into darkness. Your body feels heavier now, more relaxed. The surface beneath you feels steady and supportive, allowing you to sink into it without effort. The world grows quieter, softer, distant, and as you settle deeper into this calm, you can allow yourself to rest fully. No movement, no expectation, just stillness, the kind that comes naturally when everything has gently come to an end. Sleep can come easily now. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to follow, only rest and the quiet continuation of the night. Sweet dreams,